Chapter 627. Yu Shernan was a little confused. What this kid said was wrong. Everything he said was correct. Basically, there was one thing in many things nowadays, and that was the wine. If everyone could open up this kind of brewing technique, wouldn't everyone be able to live a good life? But it was easier said than done. Could it be that this kid wanted to? Kid, are you saying that you're going to hand them all over the place in your academy? And the forging technique of the invulnerable shield and the invincible spear that you mentioned before? Yes. Zhang Feng slammed the table, and then picked up his wine glass and clinked it with Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling. Then he said, "Actually, old Feng knows my plan." Brother Bashi, you don't know yet, right? Let me tell you a secret. Don't tell anyone else. Seeing Zhang Feng pull him up, Feng Xianling couldn't continue sitting there. He whispered in Yu Shernan's ear, "You should have heard of this thing called the mysterious scripture, right? This kid knows this stuff. Moreover, it is said that Mozi and Lu Ban comprehended part of it, and that's why they were able to comprehend that kind of strange skill. You don't know that the previous strategy against the Turkic Tubo and the other countries, and the lifting of the blockade at Guanlong, were all made by this kid." Yu Shernan couldn't help but think highly of Zhang Feng again. "You mean this thing was made by this kid?" Feng Xianling glanced at Zhang Feng and said, "Not only that, the cooperative and the fine salt that you praised so much were also made by this kid." What? This time, Yu Shernan finally couldn't sit still. He had always thought that this was made by the emperor and several state dukes. But he didn't know that these things, from politics to national policy to business, were all made by this kid. He finally understood why Li Shimin and the others respected Zhang Feng so much. Thinking of this, Yu Shernan stared at Zhang Feng and asked, "If that's the case, then the beer and barbecue on the market were all made by you?" Zhang Feng shrugged. "Not only that, your favorite bone-strengthening powder was also made by this kid." Feng Xianling directly told Yu Shernan everything that had happened. Yu Shernan was so shocked that his mind was in chaos. The strategic planning of the nation, the things in the business world, and the lewd tricks, all of these were created by this kid? Was he even human? How was this possible? He couldn't link all of this to Zhang Feng. If it weren't for Feng Xuanling's words today, he would have thought that the locust controlling stuff and the Nyang bone strengthening powder were all Sun Simiao's doing. Right. Speaking of the locust controlling stuff, it seemed that this kid was also the one who made it. Otherwise, if he had a way, Dr. Sun wouldn't have hidden it for so long. And there would be rumors about it in the outside world. What kind of freak was this kid? Had he really read that amazing scripture? Su Rian and the others had never seen that amazing scripture, but this thing had been widely circulated. At that time, it was rumored that Confucius got the amazing scripture and created the Book of Songs. Later, Mencius, Lao Tzu, and the others became the greatest Confucian scholars one after another. After that, although this amazing scripture was widely circulated, it had never appeared in the world again. Yu Shernan couldn't help but feel a little restless at this time. Who wouldn't read the amazing scripture? "My young friend, what are the subjects in your academy?" Finally, Yu Shernan asked the question in his heart. Hearing that, Zhang Feng said, "In reply to Mr. Bo Shi, my White Deer College's main subjects are the 3-character classic, the Book of Songs, and mathematics. Poems, books, etiquette, and other things are supplementary. Among them there are physics and chemistry. These things are the foundation of my academy, so only a very small number of amazing geniuses are qualified to sign contracts and study them. And among them, it includes the production and research of the textile machine that can be controlled and weaved day and night. There's also the research of the stainless steel, which is to make an impenetrable shield and an invincible spear. You should have heard that old Chen is setting up a car factory and a shipyard. These are the most sophisticated things. When the time comes, they will be researched in a place that I named the Research Institute. The others can also learn some basic things. There are also military studies, medical studies, business studies, forging, manufacturing, brewing, and other professions. Finally, I will temporarily set up 3 factories on Shao Mountain. One is a steel factory that specializes in mass production of shields, spears, crossbows, and so on. Another one specializes in brewing the tires of iron carriages and war chariots. The last one is the textile factory I mentioned just now. On one hand, it's to provide them with a lucrative career. And the other reason? It's also because they are poor. If you want to run this big academy, you will need a huge amount of money, so Zhang Feng said everything that he wanted to say in an eloquent manner. However, he didn't explain what those subjects were. However, business studies, medical studies, and other skills were nothing more than craftsmen. Yu Shernan knew a little about them. Not to mention the skills of a chef. He had tasted Zhang Feng's skills when he was in the palace. He also knew a little about the brewing industry. However, there were only 4 subjects. He couldn't understand. Chapter 628. Little Friend Zhang Feng. This old man knows about mathematics. I've also seen it in Lao Li's house. However, this old man still doesn't understand physics, let alone chemistry. Can you explain it to this old man in detail? Yu Shernan's curiosity was piqued. He knew a little about physics, as well as the magical division and multiplication table. He also learned some things from his conversation with Du Ruhui. Du Ruhui, who mastered this thing, was actually able to handle the complicated matters of food distribution, registration, storage, and so on. How shocking was this? If it was an ordinary person, facing thousands of people coming to buy food or exchange food every day, wouldn't it take dozens of people to handle it? This could not help but highlight the power of mathematics. But what was physics? Although he had heard of it, what he heard was definitely different from what Zhang Feng said. Zhang Feng also knew that Yu Shernan would ask this. He deliberately dragged it out and said, "Old man Bo Sure, actually, this is the highest level of mathematics. For example, if an illiterate person doesn't even know how to read, how can he learn the book of songs?" However, when Zhang Feng saw the displeasure on Yu Shernan's face, he hurriedly said, "The so-called physics is actually studying something. For example, how to use the power of nature to transport water to a mountain instead of using manpower. Also, how to make a caddy of iron and a caddy of cotton fall from a high place at the same time and land at the same time, etc. These are all more profound things. They all require the foundation of mathematics to be able to calculate things. Isn't this what the fraud is studying?" Yu Shernan instantly lost interest. "What about chemistry? What's that?" This. Zhang Feng was a little speechless. At this moment, he did not know how to explain it to Yu Shernan. There was no way to explain it. How to explain it? After thinking for a while, Zhang Feng said, "Do you still remember the thing I mentioned just now? My research institute is to study how to let the people eat their fill, wear warm clothes, and have a warehouse full of food. Also about the ship." "Oh right, old Feng. Have you told this to Mr. Bo Sure?" Feng Xianling shook his head. "I haven't told him yet. This thing hasn't been done yet. How can I tell him? But now that you've said it, I'll tell him, okay?" Feng Xianling pursed his lips and told Yu Shernan everything about the shipyard, the Sea Silk Road, and the car factory. Yu Shernan was dumbfounded. Especially the kind of iron ship that didn't need manpower to paddle and could move the ship. What kind of thing was that? This was something he had never heard of. What was this? This was the real lewd trick. Compared with the craftsmen who called themselves strange masters, if this thing was really built, the Tang dynasty would really enter the Golden Age. Plus, there would be endless food, those looms, and the invincible spears and crossbows. Although Yu Shernan did not agree with war, the foundation of a country was its military. If there was no strong military, how could the safety of the people be guaranteed? Zhang Feng, this brat, simply included everything from military to business to agriculture. This. Yu Shernan did not dare to think about it. He hurriedly asked, "Young friend, what you said, is it chemistry?" "Yes. These things, whether it's physics or chemistry, are all called science. But it's still too early to talk about these things. You can just think of it as fun. This thing still needs time to be revealed." People in this era did not understand these things at all. They did not even have the basic common sense of life. If you said too much, people would only think you were crazy. But the reason why Zhang Feng told Yu Shernan at this time was that this guy was the most representative Confucian scholar of the Tang dynasty. His academy needed such a person to hold the fort. Otherwise, Zhang Feng would not have bothered to say these things. After all, if he said it too early, people would only take it as a book. Only when he said it at the right time could it have an unexpected effect. Yu Shernan also understood Zhang Feng's meaning. He nodded and said, "Don't worry. I understand what you said. But, what's the matter with the military? Could it be that you want to train soldiers?" This was also what Yu Shernan was most puzzled about. Compared to science, That stuff was like a divine object that couldn't be found anywhere. But what about military? He instantly thought of the dirty scene in the garrison camp outside Chang'an City. This was simply like the difference between heaven and earth. How could it be possible to combine these two things that were originally completely unrelated? Moreover, it was in White Deer Academy? In fact, the military was also the purpose of Feng Xuanling's visit today. He was very worried that once this thing was revealed, it would inevitably cause ripples in the imperial court. At that time, it would not be a simple problem of the academy, but a political problem. Feng Xianling patted Zhang Feng's shoulder with a serious face and asked, "Fengzi, you have to think about it. Once this military course is revealed, do you know what the consequences will be? And military studies, isn't it just reading books? Could it be that you want everyone in White Deer Academy to study the art of war?" Chapter 629. Not to mention Yu Shernan, even Du Ruhui couldn't help but worry. The military and the academy had always been at odds with each other. Otherwise, the civil and military officials wouldn't have fought against each other in the cottage. But what was Zhang Feng trying to do now? Was he trying to combine the two into one? How was this possible? There was always a taboo for soldiers, and that was to be involved in politics. It was the same for politicians. But what Zhang Feng was doing now, wasn't it? The two of them didn't dare to think further. That was why Feng Xuanling's expression suddenly changed. He was worried that if the imperial court knew that Zhang Feng's White Deer College was like this, it would become the target of the entire Tang dynasty. At that time, even if the emperor wanted to resist, it would be impossible. But Zhang Feng didn't seem to be worried about this. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about this, Mr. Bosher. Old Feng, you can rest assured. Do you think I'm stupid? How can I teach this to just anyone? Same old rules. To put it bluntly, this thing isn't made for ordinary people. Do you think this thing is made for ordinary people? Wrong. I made this thing for people who are prepared, like Tai Nyo and the other extremely talented people." Feng Xianling seemed to understand, but Yu Shernan really didn't. Actually, from the very beginning, when he heard these brats talk about an impenetrable shield and an invincible spear, he had always felt a faint sense of worry. If you said that this thing was serious, it was really a serious problem. If you said that it wasn't serious, it wasn't a problem at all. Just as Zhang Feng said, Cheng Chimo and the others were born in the military. Take Wei Zheng's son, Wei Shuyu and Feng Yai for example. At this time, they were all holding important positions. But which hot-blooded youngster wouldn't be attracted to studying or practicing martial arts? At this moment, Zhang Feng also gave an answer. Some people are obsessed with one thing the moment they are born. Or maybe they were influenced by their parents and chose their own path. Or maybe they were inspired by the heroes in the streets and yearned for the heroism of soldiers on the battlefield. And there are even more people who are addicted to books, unable to extricate themselves. For example, Du Dabbing. Old Feng, you should be able to understand why he is so obsessed with books, right? You're always running around outside, doing housework, and even working hard outside. When you return home, you'll pressure and criticize them. You must stand out. Of course, I'm not saying that your concern is wrong. It's just that you've been instilling things into your son for a long time. Have you ever thought about your son? As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. In the long run, their character will be determined from a young age. Chapter 630. However, Yu Shernan faintly felt that he had been led astray. After thinking for a while, he could not think of a single clue. He glanced at Feng Xianling and saw that Feng Xianling was not surprised. He could only temporarily suppress the doubts in his heart and asked, "Little friend, do you mean that you want to educate them from their roots?" "Yes." Zhang Feng slapped his thigh and once again thought of a famous saying, "Mr. Bosher, some people are great in life. They don't have to worry about tomorrow since they were born. They can live a life of luxury. But they don't think that sometimes, a meal or a drink is the dream of a poor student." Zhang Feng pointed to the meat and wine on the table and said, "Take the food on our table for example. This table is worth at least 100 coins, right? If it was in the hands of a rich family, it wouldn't matter. Isn't it just 100 coins? But have you ever thought that this 100 copper coins might be a harvest that a poor family wouldn't even dare to dream of in a year? Not to mention eating and drinking. If this trend continues for a long time, it will inevitably cause a catastrophe. Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling heard this and could not help but ask in unison, what catastrophe? In their view, this was just a normal thing. Zhang Feng lightly pointed to the door and said, people have dreams. Just like how we think when we see such a table of delicious food before we go to school? It's bound to be. One day in the future, I will eat meat and drink wine like this. Isn't this normal? Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling did not understand what Zhang Feng wanted to say. But after hearing this, they thought about it and nodded. You're right. This is a normal reaction. But don't say it. This shouldn't be, right? Zhang Feng sighed and put the wine cup on the table. He stood up and shook his head with his hands behind his back. Wrong. Big and very wrong. In fact, this thing is called a dream. And there is another saying, it is called desire. Human desire is a terrible thing. Once it takes shape, this thing is enough to destroy a family, a city, and even a country. Buzz. This time, Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling really understood. If they still did not understand at this time, then there was really a problem. Previously, when Zhang Feng had not mentioned it, they had thought that it was something that humans should have. But at this time when Zhang Feng said this, they carefully thought about what Zhang Feng said today. Yu Shernan could not help but ask, Zhang Feng, little friend, you mean, you want to use military training to temper these people's temperament? Zhang Feng gave Yu Shernan a thumbs up in approval. Yes, that's my goal. Think about it. Many of these people might enter the imperial court and become officials in the future. I don't want to be criticized behind my back when the time comes, saying, Ayaya, look, this corrupt official is from the White Deer Academy. What is this? You are destroying your own reputation. And more importantly, you have seen the situation in the Tang dynasty now. The 3 lives and 6 ministry system, plus the system of recommendation for the imperial examination, basically, many talents are in the hands of those big families. And here, I am equivalent to a clear stream, not mixed with any interests. I only care about how many people I train. Under the premise of no interests, how can I not train the next generation of qualified successors? Yu Shernan heard this. He was a little touched. But more than that, he admired him. He stood up and bowed to Zhang Feng like a Confucian scholar. Zhang Feng was so surprised that he hurriedly stood up and bowed back. Yu Shernan let out a deep sigh. Presumably, this is all your military knowledge, right? Although Yu Shernan pointed it out, Zhang Feng's face didn't turn red at all. After all, if Yu Shernan, a great Confucian scholar, didn't think of these things, then Zhang Feng doubted whether his reputation in this lifetime was exaggerated. Yes, Mr. Bo sure is right. These things are actually called psychology, mixed in every curriculum. And in military, these things are called psychological tactics. Think about it. Now, there are so many countries around the Tang dynasty. In the far west, there is the black-clothed Abbasid Caliphate, which is not inferior to the Tang dynasty, and some countries are even more powerful than the Tang dynasty. What I need is the skill sand table training, the ability to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, and the ability to subdue the enemy without fighting under the condition of being familiar with military books. This. Yu Shernan smiled bitterly and interrupted Zhang Feng's endless speech. Young friend, don't say any more. Old man doesn't understand these things, and he doesn't want to understand them. This old man knows that this is your ability, and old man can't probe into it. But there is still a trace of confusion in my heart. I wonder if young friend can solve it? At this time, Zhang Feng was a little drunk. Obviously, he talked too much. At first, Yu Shernan didn't notice, but now the more Yu Shernan listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. If he continued to talk, it wouldn't be a discussion of academics, but a discussion of military books. This was a taboo in literature. So he could only stop Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng choked for a moment. He wasn't angry. Waving his hand, he sat down again, clinked his wine cup with Yu Shernan, and said, Mr. Bo sure, please ask. Yu Shernan then said, Old man has always been curious. Young friend, who is your master? Zhang Feng had long known that he was going to ask this question. After all, he had already thought of a set of excuses for this matter. Zhang Feng sighed, looking a little lonely. After 3 cups of wine, he said, Let's not talk about this for now. Let's talk about something else. Chapter 631. Yu Shernan almost sprayed a mouthful of wine on Zhang Feng's face. He waited for a long time. That's all you said? Who dared to do this in the Tang dynasty? Except for the emperor, there were only a few people who dared to do this. However, Yu Shernan couldn't find any sign of anger. After all, it was a big taboo to rashly ask about someone's master. Zhang Feng was lucky that he didn't get angry. Although he knew that Feng Xianling had told him about Zhang Feng's master, he couldn't resist his curiosity. He could faintly hear the 8-front formation and the Zhuge legacy from it. However, he wasn't sure. After all, he hadn't studied this kind of military book. However, at this time, seeing Zhang Feng's lonely look, Yu Shernan knew that he couldn't ask. He could only go to Feng Xianling and ask, "Brother Feng this?" Feng Xianling looked at Zhang Feng and then looked at Yu Shernan and said, "In fact, I forgot to tell you this. This guy once said that he had cultivated on Wutai Mountain for 5,000 years and that Zhuge Kongming was his disciple." At first, Old Man also thought that this guy was talking nonsense. But now, Old Man felt that this guy's words could be combined with something in military books. Could it be? Shoo! Yu Shernan's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. He hurriedly covered Feng Xuanling's mouth. "Brother Feng, you actually believe such a preposterous excuse? This is just this guy's nonsense. Although this is the first time I met this guy, although he is reliable, his mouth." Feng Xianling sighed and nodded. "This is all because of this guy. If he could have a family, he wouldn't be so lonely. This guy was once hit hard. His family was originally a rich family in XX place. Because of a mountain flood, the whole family died. If he was a normal person, he would have done something." Yu Shernan fell silent. He finally understood why this brat was so out of tune and why he talked so much nonsense. This was all caused by loneliness. Yu Shernan couldn't help but sympathize with Zhang Feng. "Young friend, Old Man knows that you're not feeling well, but people need to look forward. Think about it. Once your academy becomes famous in the Tang dynasty, won't you also have a meteoric rise? When the time comes, the proper thing to do is to help your Zhang family flourish." Zhang Feng was dumbfounded. He looked suspiciously at the two old fellows who were whispering to each other, wondering what they were talking about. However, he didn't want to listen to the whispers of the two old men. Borrowing Yu Shernan's words, he sighed and raised his cup to drink. Fine. Old Feng usually looked like an honest person. Who would have thought that this support would be so beautiful? However, Zhang Feng's face was still full of bitterness and hatred. He said, "Isn't that so? That's why I spent all my life learning and all my wealth to establish this White Deer College. That's why I thought that if I could pass the imperial examination 3 years later, I could enter the imperial court and take this opportunity to create more talents for the Tang dynasty. But, alas." Zhang Feng said a few words, but didn't know what else to say. He sighed deeply. After a while he continued, "I know what old Mr. Boshi is thinking. Actually, let me tell you this. The psychology I mentioned just now is just a support. The real driving force of this academy still needs some foundation. For example, the training of these people's temperament is undoubtedly the kind of military training." Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling looked at each other and asked in unison. "Military training? Is it the kind of drill in the military now?" Zhang Feng shook his head and said with some disdain, "Those are just the fighting skills of children. I don't want to learn from them. The military training I mentioned is a complete system, including physical training, resistance to beatings, fatigue resistance, and even the ability to react in severe fatigue, etc. Those who can get through this stage, no matter if they are in the military, politics, literature, or business at the very least, they will have a good physique and a good temperament. Those who do not have a strong temperament will be automatically eliminated in less than half a month. Do you think I'm really stupid? There are so many people who need to eat. Where can I get food for them? This way, I can let the flowers in the greenhouse have a chance to be tempered by the storm. As for the ordinary people, I can show them the hardships and sufferings of climbing up. This way, they won't go astray on the road of life." Zhang Feng used about 4 hours to tell Yu Shernan the complete content of the military training, as well as its benefits. Yu Shernan, on the other hand, was initially disdainful of Zhang Feng and somewhat resistant to his long-winded speech. Gradually, he was shocked by Zhang Feng's understanding of human nature. This was what truly shocked him. In the beginning, Yu Shernan had looked down on Zhang Feng, but in the end, he had taken the initiative to ask questions. Gradually, he had come to understand the situation. From today onwards, this kid was talking about military science. However, this also made Yu Shernan a little shocked. This was military science? If one had to make a comparison, the things that were popular in the military now were simply bullshit. If His Majesty knew about this military philosophy, how would His Majesty react? Chapter 632. Finally, he took the bait. Zhang Feng cheered in his heart. But at this time, Zhang Feng knew that it was the real beginning. After all, it was easy to persuade a great Confucian to come to the academy, but what about 3 great Confucians? It was not enough. Zhang Feng couldn't help but ask again with a bitter face, Mr. Bashi, what do you think of my academy? Yu Shernan shook his head with a wry smile. At the beginning, this guy wouldn't say a word of praise, but now? After showing all the good things, what could Yu Shernan say? He also wanted to see what Zhang Feng's academy could do, but at this time, he couldn't praise this little guy. He had to give him a warning. Yu Shernan stroked his beard and pretended to be deep in thought. Your academy is not bad. It's just a little unorthodox. Also, it's just a hodgepodge. There's nothing new about it. Zhang Feng's eyes widened. It's okay. Damn it. If you have the ability, go to the Tang dynasty and find me an identical one. Believe it or not, if you can find me, I'll ask for that person's WeChat and Weibo accounts. In this era, there was no one else who could have such advanced ideas except for people like him. And such an advanced education idea was a perfect teaching method that was implemented in almost all schools except the aristocratic schools. Military training. Although Zhang Feng didn't know the purpose for the time being, it might not have much effect in the future. But in the Tang dynasty, its meaning was very different. This was a turbulent era, and someone might make trouble for you at any time. What's more, in history, the Turks would really break with the Tang dynasty next year. The peace that Li Shimin exchanged with his white horse on the bank of the Wei River only lasted for more than a year. But at this time, even with his intervention, although the situation was reversed, would Li Shimin give up fighting the Turks? No. After all, the humiliation he had suffered at the hands of the Turks was something that no one would ever forget, needless to say, Zhang Xian. Furthermore, Zhang Feng had been to the reclining house and learned from the veterans what the military training in the barracks was like. After all, the Chang'an Navy was in Chang'an City, which could be seen from afar. That was simply pushing him to his death. What kind of training could a chaotic battle in a bandit's lair produce? According to Zhang Feng's knowledge, the Tang dynasty lost at least several thousand people every year. Sometimes even tens of thousands of people. How did these people die? Wasn't it just a chaotic battle, coupled with military measures that didn't have the slightest bit of hygiene habits that killed them? However, none of this could be seen in White Deer College. He didn't have much hope that he could completely change the military camp. Besides, he didn't have the ability to do so. What he wanted to do was to start from White Deer College and transfer the disinfection of alcohol and the routine military training to the Tang dynasty. He wanted the academy to blossom in all aspects, be it moral, intellectual, physical, or aesthetic. This was the flower that he had mentioned to Yu Shernan before, the foil that he needed. At this time, when he heard Yu Shernan's evaluation of him, Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel anxious. After all, this was his blood, sweat, and tears. He had basically dug out all his foundation, but in return, he was only told that it was okay? No way. This was definitely not okay. I say, Mr. Bo Sure, although my academy doesn't have a collection of books now, Lao Li owes me a collection of prefaces to the Orchid Pavilion. Also, I have arranged for Li Gan and the others to search for a large number of rare ancient books. Also, I still use the conventional teaching methods, such as the Book of Songs. Don't think that I only teach a little here. Moreover, the teaching time here is rationalized. In the morning, the military training begins at 5 in the morning. After that, there will be 2 hours of recitation of the Book of Songs and so on. After that, there will be a quarter of an hour break before teaching mathematics. After that, there will be a 2-hour break. The afternoon is divided into 3 segments. The first segment is the literature class of the 100 schools of thought. Then there's the common sense elective courses, such as medical theory and general knowledge, as well as the detailed division of manufacturing and military affairs. In the evening, there will be military training. If you still think that these are not enough, then this kid really has nothing to say. Although Yu Shernan was already extremely shocked, after exchanging glances with Feng Xianling, he forcibly suppressed his shock and said, "What you said is only your appearance. Don't you know about specialization?" This kid knows. Military training is to train their physique in the morning and at night. After high-intensity training in the morning, their nerves will be tired. If they read aloud at this time, it will be easy for them to remember. In the afternoon, it is the most drowsy time of the day. If you ask them to do things that require high concentration at this time, they will be pressed to the extreme. In my opinion, it is much better than rote memorization. The more Zhang Feng spoke, the more he felt that he was being polite. Yu Shernan was also deeply attracted by Zhang Feng's teaching philosophy. He was looking forward to what kind of breakthrough the new teaching model would bring. After all, many people had been taught by him. However, Yu Shernan still maintained a look of disbelief on his face. He shook his head. However, without waiting for him to speak, Zhang Feng directly spread his hands. "If you don't believe me, why don't you come to my academy? It will only take a month. If you don't see any results, this kid will immediately close the academy. If this kid is lucky enough to satisfy Mr. Bo Sure, then would you like to stay?" Chapter 633. Yu Shernan and Feng Xianling were so shocked that their jaws almost fell off. After saying so much, he just wanted Yu Shernan to come to the academy? And he even made the bet in such a roundabout way? When he heard that Zhang Feng wanted to do a medical trial and heard that the miracle-working Dr. Sun Simiao was on the mountain, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. But Zhang Feng didn't give him a chance at all and just made the contract? Wasn't this forcing a deal? Yu Shernan looked at Zhang Feng, who glanced at him from time to time. He was angry and amused at the same time. "If you want to invite me to the academy, you have to say it clearly. What are you doing?" Yu Shernan heaved a sigh. "Well, if I had known, old man wouldn't have come here today. Now I've gotten myself into trouble." "Alas, old man thought you were doing something. It turns out that you've been digging a hole for old man." Although Yu Shernan looked angry, he didn't feel anything in his heart. If he didn't want to go, he could stand up and walk out. But he didn't. After all, Zhang Feng had really drawn out his gluttonous bug. After thinking for a while, Yu Shernan said, "Well, since you've made the bet, if old man breaks the promise with your ability, the whole Chang'an city will know in less than 2 hours." Zhang Feng's eyes lit up when he heard that. Hey, what are you talking about? Am I, Zhang Feng, that kind of person?" Feng Xuanling's mouth twitched. He coughed and turned around. He couldn't bear to look. Now he really knew Zhang Feng's ability. They hadn't done anything yet, but he had already won over Yu Shernan. This was a literary titan that even the emperor had to deal with carefully. He, in such a short period of time actually. This little demon. Feng Xianling couldn't help but write down Zhang Feng's bad habit of digging holes in his notebook. He had to go back and study it. Otherwise, when he sold him, he would still happily count the money for Zhang Feng. But at this moment, Zhang Feng's words made Feng Xuanling's hand tremble. He almost threw the wine glass away. Zhang Feng rubbed his hands and looked at Yu Shernan, saying, "Mr. Bashi, don't worry. You will see results within a month after the academy opens. Old man doesn't care about these things, but I heard that the scenery of Mount Shao is unique, and there are caves and waterfalls accompanying it. What kind of residential area are you building there? I heard that the house is not bad. Prepare a big house for the old man, facing the waterfall." "Okay. Don't worry, I will get you the best place." Zhang Feng immediately agreed. Now that Yu Shernan had won over, Zhang Feng's heart was as sweet as honey. However, he rubbed his hands and asked, "But Mr. Bashi, I heard that you, Chu Suiliang, Elder Chu, Ouying Sun, Elder O and Xue Jiha, Elder Xue." Stop. Yu Shernan couldn't help but explode. "So you, kid, are not only lusting after me, but also want to take these old bones into Mount Shao? What do you think you have in Mount Shao?" If it was just him, then Yu Shernan would have considered it as a favor to Li Shimin and would have also come. Moreover, he also didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. But now, he actually wanted to trap his 3 good friends in? How could that be possible? Yu Shernan stood up, his face gloomy. Kid, don't go overboard. Do you know who the four of us are? If it weren't for your poetry collection, the old man wouldn't have come to see you. As a junior, he agreed to go to the academy because of the novelty of your academy. You actually hit the snake with a stick and want them to come? Yu Shernan was so angry that he laughed. Then show me what you're really capable of. That's right. I remember that the previous Dragon Boat poetry meet was cancelled due to various reasons. If you want the three of them to come, then show me what you're really capable of. The Mid-Autumn Festival Poetry Meet is a grand event that gathers all the literati in the world. When the time comes, I will also be participating. If you're really capable, then let those three old fogies come to you during the poetry meet. As they spoke, Yu Shernan had already walked to the door. However, at the door, Yu Shernan paused and looked at Zhang Feng. He said meaningfully, "The old man thinks highly of you." Zhang Feng was speechless. How the F***ck could this be? However, wasn't it just a poetry meet? Just nice. Lao Tzu would make a pot of stew for him. He was just worried about not having a teacher. He even sent this to me? Good. At that time, there will be so many poems from the Tang and Song dynasties. I don't believe that I will lose. All right. Thank you for your kind words. I will definitely be there on time. However, Zhang Feng's eyes turned and said, "Mr. Bosher, why don't I give you 2 jars of wine?" Yu Shernan, who had just walked out of the door, heard this and could not help but pause again. He seemed to hesitate. However, in the end, his rationality was defeated by Zhang Feng's wine. Yu Shernan sighed and said, "Is the old man the kind of person who is greedy for wine? If you really want to give him, why not give him 10 jars? Chapter 634. Yu Shernan felt that he had been played by this kid again. However, he couldn't detect any abnormalities. In the end, he could only shake his robe and leave. As soon as he turned the corner and walked out of the crooked neck of Tonghui Lane, Feng Xianling couldn't help but ask, "Brother Yu, what do you think of Zhang Feng? He can take on great responsibilities. However, this kid is too bad. We have to be careful." Yu Shernan's words basically judged Zhang Feng. However, at this moment, Yu Shernan said again, "Actually, old man really hopes that those stubborn old men can come to the academy. This kid isn't simple at all. He was able to perfectly assemble so many things that seem to be disorderly and even unrelated to each other. This is really beyond this old man's expectations. Moreover, this kid isn't bad. That's the most important thing." Feng Xianling finally relaxed. "Brother Yu, you don't know. This kid is brainless and straightforward. He says whatever he wants to say. However, this kid knows a lot, so he can." Yu Shernan smiled bitterly and shook his head. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that the academy's matters are too serious, old man really wants to be friends with him despite the difference in age. However, what scripture did that person say is true? At this moment, they were outside and there were many eyes and ears. Therefore, Yu Shernan could only ask about the mysterious scripture that he had heard from Li Shimin. Although he really wanted to ask in front of Zhang Feng, he still gave up in the end. This was originally a simple matter. He didn't want to turn it into a transaction. However, he really wanted to know about the mysterious scripture. In his conversation with Zhang Feng, he had a feeling that the so-called science, physics, psychology, and military were actually the mysterious scripture. This was what really attracted Yu Shernan. If those 3 old fellows were to find out about this matter, then with their tempers, not to mention not asking for money, even if they had to pay for it, they would still go to White Deer Academy. Yu Shernan was well aware of how attractive that thing was. Although there were very few people who knew about this thing, as long as they knew about it, which one of them wouldn't scramble like a flock of ducks? However, Yu Shernan did not do so. After all, he felt that this kid had set a trap for him today. He felt uncomfortable and disgusted. If news of this were to spread, he, Yu Shernan, would still have his face? However, Feng Xianling didn't think so when she heard this. At this time, Feng Xianling was deeply shocked. In Feng Xuanling's memory, there were no more than 5 people who could receive such an evaluation from Yu Shernan. Today, he actually witnessed it with his own eyes. Although in their eyes, Zhang Feng didn't need Yu Shernan's affirmation. He had already grown to the point where he could compete with the great Confucian. Chapter 635. Giddy up! Giddy up! Giddy up! Just as Zhang Feng plunged into the veteran's lair of the reclining square, 10 fast horses suddenly rushed into the gate of mind. When the 10 fast horses entered the city gates, they did not show any signs of slowing down. From afar, everyone could clearly see the bright yellow flags on the backs of the horses. They were messengers. Any citizen of the Tang dynasty could not recognize the county magistrate or the city gate guards, but they had to remember the messengers of the Yellow Gate. This was because these messengers were usually dispatched for economic and military affairs or important matters. Under these circumstances, any citizen, no matter what they did, had to make way for them. Even if you were the crown prince, the grand tutor, or even a first-class official, you had to obediently make way for them to reach the emperor. There was no choice. This was the iron law of the Tang dynasty. At this moment, when everyone saw that there were actually 10 small yellow flags at the city gate, they couldn't help but be shocked. They hurriedly made way for the city gate, and even the city guard opened the city gate in an instant. Giddy up! The shouting along the way resounded throughout the peaceful Chang'an city. The angry shouts continued all the way to the Vermilion Bird Gate without stopping. The leader of the Yellow Gate took out a strong crossbow that he carried with him. There was even a small bag hanging on the crossbow. He aimed at a wooden pillar on the city gate and shot it. Then, without stopping, he shouted, "Quickly open the city gate! Economic and military affairs." The city guard hurriedly took off the brocade bag. After seeing the contents, he hurriedly shouted, "Open the gate quickly!" In the muffled sound, the 10 riders rushed into the imperial city without slowing down. Then, they rushed all the way to the Taiji Palace where Li Shimin was. Report. Economic and military affairs. Economic and military affairs. Before they reached the Taiji Palace, the leader of the Yellow Gate hurriedly took out a waste token. But here, they could not rush in like this. They would only face the strong crossbows of thousands of Jinwu guards. The leader was Yu Qigong's son, Yu Baolin. He was a man built like an iron tower, and no one dared to say a word when he stood at the entrance of Taiji Palace. Yu Baolin took the medallion and examined it. Then, he searched them and hurriedly brought them to the imperial study. Without waiting for Yu Baolin to report, little Gizi, who had been waiting here for a long time, indicated for him to leave. He then led the group through a small yellow door into the imperial study of Taiji Palace. Li Shimin seemed to have long known about the matter of the little yellow sect charging into the imperial city. Such a thing had only happened once during his reign, and that was the time when the old thief Xieli had besieged the city. For things to turn out this way, it was clear that things were not simple. Li Shimin waved his hand with a solemn expression, stopping Xiao Huangmen from kneeling. "Speak!" Xiao Huangmen's cracked lips were covered in blood. He knelt on one knee and shouted hoarsely, "Reporting to the Emperor, Long Yu Dao has an urgent report. Recently, the people we planted in Tubo have sent back a message. Please take a look, Your Majesty." As he spoke, Xiao Huangmen's hands trembled as he took out a letter covered in blood and handed it to little Gizi. When little Gizi saw this, he did not dare to be careless. He hurriedly handed this blood-stained letter to Li Shimin. Xiao Huangmen continued, "Your Majesty, at this time, the border between Long Yu Dao and Tubo has already erupted in chaos. Even Tubo's refugees have been raiding our Long Yu Dao for a long time. Even Tubo's army had raided a small town on the border 5 days ago. Even large-scale civil unrest has erupted in Tubo's territory. At this time, the civil unrest in Tubo has faintly formed a huge force." Following Xiao Huangmen's introduction, Li Shimin had also finished reading the letter. Actually, the contents of the letter were not much different from this. It was even more accurate. Rather than civil unrest, it was more accurate to say that it was a change caused by the famine caused by the plague of locusts. What was mentioned in the letter was far more than what Xiao Huangmen knew. There were at least 100,000 people involved in the civil unrest. Most importantly, from the initial lack of food, there was a phenomenon of cannibalism in Tubo. This was terrifying. When faced with such a situation, Tubo could only do one thing, and that was to suppress it. This was the cause of this tragedy. It was the same for Tuyuhun. Li Shimin suddenly thought of something and asked, "Is there any news from Jianan Dao?" "Your Majesty, the envoy from Jianan Dao is waiting outside the door." "Come in." Li Shimin waved his hand. In an instant, the remaining 9 people hurriedly entered the imperial study. Once they entered, they hurriedly knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, there is an urgent report from Jiannan Dao, Yongchang, Yaozhou, Kuan Prefecture, and the neighboring Yazhou Prefecture have successively encountered an influx of refugees from Tubo. A large number of soldiers have even participated in the plundering. Min Prefecture, Hezhou, Yaozhou, and the other places of Guanyi Dao have also been plundered many times. The local garrisons have requested to go to war. There is a report from Yuzhou that the Turks have recently made unusual military movements. It is suspected to be related to the civil unrest in Tubo. Listening to the reports one after another, Li Shimon's eyes suddenly emitted a murderous intent. He was also ambitious. This was heaven's will. If he could make use of this opportunity to take down Tubo and Tuyuhun, then... Chapter 636. Li Shimon had long wanted to take action against Tubo, an uncertain factor. But because of some things, Li Shimon could only put it aside for the time being. But now, this was God's will. Did God want him to subdue Tubo? Thinking of this, Li Shimon waved his hand and interrupted everyone. Present all the memorials. I'll decide on the specific matters after tomorrow's court meeting. After everyone left, Li Shimon carefully read the documents one by one and then asked, Xiao Gizi, do you think it's okay to send troops now? Xiao Gizi was stunned. It was the first time the emperor had asked him this question. Xiao Gizi thought for a moment and then said, Your Majesty, if we send troops now, we don't have any justification. I think it's okay to first deploy troops in these places that are often robbed and then station a large number of troops to guard the market. Li Shimon was silent. Tell Cheng Yaojin, Yu Qigong, Qin Qiong, and the others to come quickly. As you wish. Li Shimon was very conflicted. Looking at the territory of the Tang dynasty and Tubo, which was deep in the Tang dynasty, he really felt more and more uncomfortable. If he could take this opportunity to directly eradicate Tubo, it would definitely be a magnificent feat that would make him famous for 100 generations. Didn't the old stubborn people in the court say that he didn't have any great achievements during his reign? If he took down Tubo. Just as Li Shimon was getting more and more excited and wished that he could directly lead the troops to kill Tubo, Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin walked into the imperial study with Qin Qiong, who was relatively smaller than them. Old General, Subordinate General, Cheng Yaojin, Yu Qigong, and Qin Qiong pay respects to Your Majesty. Several people's voices interrupted Li Shimon's imagination. Dear ministers, please take a look at these secret reports. Li Shimon pointed to several secret memorials on the table. The three of them accepted the order and went forward to check them. However, at this time, the three of them frowned deeply. Even Cheng Yaojin, whom Li Shimon had been looking forward to, was frowning at this time. What? Is there anything wrong with this secret memorial? Li Shimon was a little angry. When Qin Qiong heard this, he looked at the three of them and said, Your Majesty, this secret memorial is very detailed, but I feel that it is a little unusual. Your Majesty, I also think it's a little strange. Logically speaking, if such a big thing really happened in Tubo and they really couldn't defend it, they would definitely come to the Tang dynasty for help. But until now, no one has come. It doesn't make sense. How could they not know what the emperor meant? To be able to know at the first moment, and then not be in a hurry to discuss countermeasures, but to summon the generals in Chong'an, the meaning was self-evident. The emperor wanted to go to war. However, when the three of them said this, Li Shimon was even more determined to go to war. If we go to war with Tubo and Tuyuhun now, what do you think our chances of winning are? The three of them were shocked. Was the emperor determined to go to war? Cheng Yaojin pondered and hurriedly said, Your Majesty, I remember that Fengzi once said that now is not the time to send troops to Tubo. Li Shimon interrupted Cheng Yaojin a little irritably. I know this, but now is a heaven-sent opportunity. If we don't seize this opportunity, the Turks' garrison in Yuzhou has shown signs of a large number of mobilization. It seems to be related to Tubo. If we miss this opportunity and let the Turks invade Tubo, the Tang dynasty will be in danger. Your Majesty, we can't think of it this way. If we send troops now, we are bound to encounter the Turks. At this time, we will have to face three formidable enemies who are covetously eyeing us. Your Majesty, this is no small matter. If we make a move now, it will definitely affect the whole situation. No, the whole situation will be in chaos. They are already dissatisfied with the things we have just taken control of. If we send troops now, what will the people of the world think of us? We don't have a good reason to send troops. The three of them spoke one after another and directly rejected Li Shimon's words. At this time, Li Shimon was also a little hesitant. He waved his hand in annoyance and said, "You can leave first. Let me think about it." The three of them looked at each other and then slowly left. As soon as they left the imperial study, the three of them could not help but look serious. There was an important factor that they did not mention just now, and that was the lack of food. The army was now short of food and could only eat 2 bowls of porridge every day. If they went to war now, how could they fight? When it came to war, the three of them had never been careless. However, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. They were not Zhang Feng, who could conjure something out of thin air to add to the pot. They were all uncouth people. If they put those poisonous things in, it would be a big problem. The three of you, are you going to the imperial study? Just as the three of them were walking out of Taiji Palace with worried expressions, they happened to bump into Feng Xianling, who was just about to go see Li Shimon. The three of them sighed. They nodded in a muffled voice. Cheng Yaojin said in a muffled voice, "At this time, I advise you not to go see His Majesty." Feng Xianling heard this and smiled confidently. Is it because of that tubo thing? When the three of them saw Feng Xuanling's expression, they couldn't help but look at each other. Then, Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong picked up Feng Xianling and said, "Elder Feng, let's go, let's find a place to have a good chat. We have encountered some troublesome matters." Chapter 637. Between the Taiji Palace and the political announcement hall, there was a barbican. At this time, in a small room in the barbican, Cheng Yaojin and the others pulled a discontented Feng Xianling to sit at a square table. Feng Xianling was somewhat resistant to the strong smell of fox, sweat, and fleas on their bodies. However, he also knew why the three of them had brought him here. However, he also had something important to report to the emperor, so he no longer acted reserved and directly asked, "Why did the three of you bring this old man here?" This was the armaments department, which was the territory of the military department. Coming here at this time meant that the three of them had encountered a big problem. Along the way, he heard that the little yellow door went straight to the imperial palace, so he faintly guessed that this matter was definitely not ordinary. Hearing Feng Xuanling's question, Cheng Yaojin and the others didn't pretend. The three of them were straightforward people. Cheng Yaojin, Yu Qigong, and Qin Qiong looked at each other and said, "We just went to see the emperor. The emperor is preparing to tubo." While speaking, Cheng Yaojin's right hand gently drew a line across his neck. How could Feng Xianling not know what this action meant? Moreover, the emperor already had that intention. But why did he choose this time? He clearly remembered that when the emperor talked about this matter last time, Feng Zi clearly told the emperor that this was not a good time to start a war. What's going on? Feng Xianling couldn't help but feel anxious. What's going on? The Tang dynasty is lacking everywhere. Although it's a bit better, it's not a good time to use force. And what's going on here? Before Cheng Yaojin could speak, Yu Qigong sighed and said, "Old Feng, this matter is a bit complicated. If you choose Long Yu, Jiannan, and Guanyi, as long as it's close to Tubo and Tubo, you'll basically be harassed every day. Even Tubo's soldiers will participate in the plundering." Feng Xianling turned pale with fright and hurriedly asked, "This is impossible. How is this possible?" Cheng Yaojin forced a smile. When people are hungry, they will even eat mud. Besides, it's not like you don't know that the last locust plague came from Tubo and other places, right? Think about what happened to the Tang dynasty, and think about the Tubo dynasty. Hearing this, Feng Xuanling's face suddenly changed. He muttered, "Could it be that Tubo?" "Yeah." Yu Qigong patted Feng Xuanling's shoulder and said, "Our Tang dynasty has Zhang Feng, so we've been dealing with the locust plague since the beginning. You should know about this, right?" Feng Xianling fell silent. Indeed. In the beginning, when Zhang Feng said that there would be a plague of locusts, no one took it seriously. Otherwise, they would have started stockpiling food and then slowly started to control the plague. However, in the end, it still caused serious consequences, not to mention Tubo. The drought. Then came the locust plague. Although during this period, the Tang dynasty did make a lot of money, it also added fuel to the fire in Tubo. Although this was all a strategy. At this time, after the incident broke out, Feng Xianling still felt that it was inconceivable. What was this? This was national policy, but if war broke out at this time, then... Before Feng Xianling could figure out what was going on, Qin Qiong, who had been silent all this time, slowly said, "Not only that, according to the reports of spies, at least thousands of people starved to death in Tubo and Tuyuhan every day, and there were even cases of cannibalism. As for the survival of the people, the leaders of the two countries did not have a good solution, so unprecedented civil unrest broke out. According to the secret memorial, at present, the total number of people in the two countries is more than 100,000. Also, according to the news from General Li Jing in Yuzhou, spies in Yuzhou found that a large number of Turkic soldiers showed signs of mobilization, suspected to be directed at Tubo. Elder Feng, think about it, if the Turkic army went south to take Tubo, what would happen?" Hiss. Feng Xianling could not help but be shocked. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He wanted to leave in a hurry, but before he could leave, Chang Yaojin pulled him back and said, "Don't worry, this war won't happen." Of course, they knew what Feng Xianling was going to do, but how could they let Feng Xianling go at this time? Chang Yaojin was fine, but Qin Qiong and Yu Qigong were not in Chang'an often. They finally caught Feng Xianling, who had just returned from the tavern. How could they let him go so easily? Moreover, they had been rejected 3 times when they went to the tavern. This morning, they learned that this guy actually took Yu Shernan to see Zhang Feng. What was he doing? How could they not want to know what Zhang Feng wanted to do? After all, the magical sabers, spears, and shields that the guy mentioned were treasures. However, at this time, it was Feng Xuanling's turn to be confused. "Why do you say that this war cannot be fought?" Chang Yaojin said with a wry smile. "The army is short of food. How do you think this war can be fought? Do you want the soldiers to go to the battlefield with empty stomachs?" Feng Xianling was stunned. However, after thinking about it, now that there was a shortage of food everywhere in the Tang dynasty, it was possible that the army was short of food. He could not help but nod and say, "You're right. How about old man go to see his majesty first, and then we'll talk later?" No, old Feng. You know that we are always away from home. It's not easy to find something good, so we want to talk to you. It's not urgent to see his majesty. Chapter 638. Yu Qigong rubbed his hands and pressed Feng Xianling onto the bench. "Actually, we have to start with Zhang Feng. I heard that he has an invulnerable shield and an invincible spear. I also heard that this kid established an academy in that godforsaken place, Shao Mountain." Feng Xianling didn't know what these 3 uncouth men wanted to do, so he nodded suspiciously. "That's true. Then do you know if that kid is making those things?" Feng Xianling shook his head. "You know that houses are being built in Shao Mountain. How could he have time to do that? Moreover, if brother you didn't go there today, that kid might not have told us how to make an invulnerable shield and that magical teaching philosophy." Yu Qigong couldn't help but be curious. He had also heard of the teaching philosophy that Zhang Feng had spread out before. It was just that he had forcefully applied all the things that were common among the people. Was this magical? Yu Qigong couldn't help but ask, "Isn't it just some little tricks? Is it worth it?" "Little tricks?" Feng Xianling glanced at Yu Qigong and said, "If I told you that Feng Zi has a set of military knowledge that would make you jealous, would you believe me?" Military knowledge? The 3 of them weren't interested in other things. After all, they were in the army. However, they couldn't help but be attracted by the word military knowledge. Moreover, it was a magical military knowledge. The 3 of them asked again in unison, "What kind of military knowledge? Isn't it just training soldiers, studying sand tables, and then familiarizing yourself with military books?" Feng Xianling shook his head with a look of disdain. He rolled his wrinkled eyelids and said, "Vulgar. Do you think this academy is just a drill ground? Forget it. Since we're all officials in the same court, old man will tell you about Zhang Feng's military knowledge today." The military knowledge that Zhang Feng talked about in his own words is that if he can only teach those boorish soldiers, then his academy should close down. Because those people don't deserve to go to his academy. Chang Yaojin's eyes flashed. He suddenly thought of something that Chang Chumo had told him when he went back. It was about heavy cavalry, light cavalry, and assassins. Could it be this kid was going to do this? Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong, who didn't know this, were confused. They looked at Feng Xianling and Chang Yaojin, who was so excited that his beard was twitching, and asked, "Old Hey, do you know something? What is this kid doing? Didn't he say he wanted to open an academy? What are you doing? Why are you doing this now?" Feng Xianling knew that Chang Yaojin remembered something. He didn't say anything, and only looked at the three with a smile that wasn't a smile. Feng Xianling felt a sense of satisfaction that he had never felt before. At this moment, he finally understood why Zhang Feng liked to speak like this every time. It was simply too satisfying. Chang Yaojin really didn't want to tell this to these two. Otherwise, with their temper, wouldn't they tear apart Zhang Feng's skinny body? However, he couldn't stop the two of them from pulling at each other, so he said in a muffled voice, "I heard my Chumo say before that Feng Zi wants to turn Chumo into a heavy cavalry. I want to pass through tens of thousands of troops, and no one can stop me." Feng Xianling looked at Chang Yaojin with some surprise. This guy actually knew how to argue? But after thinking about it, he understood. It must have been Du Go and the others. Otherwise, with his temper, he wouldn't be surnamed Chung if he could say something good. But that wasn't important. From Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong's open mouths, it could be seen that these two were the most shocked. But Chang Yaojin didn't intend to let it go. Instead, he patted the two's shoulders worriedly. "Originally, this was too shocking. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid you'd be scared to death. But since you insist, then I won't pretend anymore. I'll tell you everything." Feng Xuanling's mouth twitched. But he still suppressed the disgust in his heart. He also wanted to see the expressions of these two war gods when they heard the last part. Presumably, that would be the real satisfaction. Yu Qigong was obviously shocked. He was so excited that his voice trembled. "And then? Old Hey, you motherfasterous cur, hurry up and say it. Do you believe that Lao Tzu won't beat you up if you keep being so wishy-washy?" Chang Yaojin spread his hands and pretended to be in a difficult position. But when he saw that the two were clenching their fists, he hurriedly said, "Good friends, you know that Zhang Xuan's son, right? That guy likes to pretend to be Zhao Zilong all day long. Feng Zi wants to train him to be a light cavalry that doesn't leave a trace for thousands of miles, and the kind that's as fast as lightning. Especially Wei Zheng's son, Wei Shuyu, that bastard. Do you know what Feng Zi wants him to do?" "Motherfasterous cur, say it. Do you want to be beaten up?" And then, Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong couldn't sit still anymore. Zhao Zilong. Who was that? That was the war god of a generation. Those two pieces of news were like two muffled thunder that kept ringing in their minds. And now, this bastard actually said that there was more. And it was Wei Zheng's son. Heavens! Aren't you a little too much? That Wei Zheng is fair and clean, but his son is stubborn. To think that my two sons, Yu Qigong, have always been cautious and conscientious. Why can't they do it? Why is it the two of them? Chapter 639. Yu Qigong was furious. He felt wronged. And Qin Shubao felt the same. But just when their nerves reached the limit, Chang Yaojin said slowly, "Zhang Feng wants the boy from the Wei family to be an assassin, someone even better than Jing Ku." "What? What does he want to do? Damn. Talent. Let's go. Old Black, go up the mountain and get him into the military camp. It's a waste if such a talent doesn't go to the military camp." While speaking, Yu Qigong got up and pulled Chang Yaojin away. Feng Xianling, who was watching the show, couldn't sit still. He hurriedly held the two men down, his eyes red with anxiety. "What do you want to do? This academy is registered in the Ministry of Revenue. If you dare to do this, you'll have to face the wrath of the Emperor. And Old Black, you know what to do, don't you?" Feng Xuanling's warning instantly extinguished the restlessness in the hearts of Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong. They anxiously pulled their hair. Talent. This was a talent. 100 years? They hadn't seen such a talent in 1,000 years. Not to mention the bullshasterisk T military science, just based on what Old Black said just now, they knew what it would mean if this matter was spread out. At this time, seeing the two anxious, Feng Xianling slowly stroked his beard and said, "Old man knows what you want to say, but this academy is the Emperor's idea. You should know how important this academy is to the Emperor. And the reason why Chang'an City is what it is today is because of Feng Zi's own money. He distributed 20,000 dawn of grain on this deserted mountain, so that the grain shortage in Chang'an City could be controlled. Yu Qigong was stunned. He knew about this, but he didn't expect that this boy did all this. Isn't this the Crown Prince's idea? How did this boy named Zhang Feng get the credit? Qin Qiong was a little confused. What was all this? He had just returned to Chang'an City out of curiosity about the academy. However, he had learned that the academy was established by the Crown Prince and managed by a genius from Chang'an. Moreover, the rumors that were spreading like wildfire were all from White Deer College. It would be better if the Crown Prince was the one behind it, but why did it sound like the Crown Prince wasn't the one behind it? If that was the case, then this kid. Who was he? Seeing Feng Xianling and Cheng Yaojin like this, Qin Qiong couldn't help but be even more confused. Elder Feng, can you tell me what's going on? This kid called Zhang Feng, is he really so miraculous? Magical? Let Lao Tzu tell you. Are all the soldiers in your camp eating fine salt now? Qin Qiong didn't know what Cheng Yaojin wanted to say, but he still nodded subconsciously. Yes, that's right. What do you think of this thing? Cheng Yaojin knocked on the table. Old Hey, if you have anything to say, just say it. Why are you blabbering here? You're acting like a woman. What's wrong with this fine salt? That's right. I use this thing to brush my teeth every day. Don't tell me you're the one who made this thing? Yu Qigong was also furious. He wasn't a good-tempered person to begin with. He couldn't stand being watched by Feng Xianling and Cheng Yaojin. Seeing that he was scared, Cheng Yaojin looked at him with disdain. Vulgar. Fine, I won't tease you anymore. This salt was created by Zhang Feng. Also, didn't you keep thinking about the method to deal with the Tubo Turks and the other countries? Who came up with it? Yu Qigong's eyes widened. Are you going to say that this was all created by that bastard? Cheng Yaojin nodded in front of Yu Qigong's shocked eyes. Yu Qigong only felt waves of pain in his head. His head hurt. It hurt a lot. Damn it, how could such a talent be wasted like this? No, he had to get this kid in his hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Yu Qigong felt as if a piece of his flesh had been bitten off. He had only heard about the weapons and shields in the past. But what about now? The salt and the schemes were all created by this brat. How could the impenetrable shield and the spear be fake? Whoever told him that these were fake, he would definitely break that person's third leg. At this time, Qin Qiong was the same as Yu Qigong. This time, they came back because of the lack of food in the military camp. On the other hand, it was because of this impenetrable shield and this miraculous spear. This matter had already become a legend among the upper echelons of the military. At first, everyone just treated it as a rumor. But after meeting Cheng Yaojin, he couldn't help but be surprised. This thing was actually real. But now, after hearing what Cheng Yaojin and Feng Xianling said, he felt terrible. This was real. This was all real. It seemed that this time, no matter how big the riot at the border was, even if the Tubo and the Turks' allied forces were, as long as he had the shield and spear, he would not be afraid. What was there to be afraid of? Chapter 640. Yu Qigong and the other man could no longer sit still. Right now, the military camp was short of food, and the situation there was precarious. A war could break out at any time. At this time, after confirming that Zhang Feng indeed had such a divine weapon, how could the two of them sit still? They grabbed Cheng Yaojin by the back of his collar and hurriedly ran out. Feng Xianling saw this and shook his head without saying anything. After all, Feng Zi had already said this. It would be strange if these people could sit still. Moreover, military science was indeed of great importance. How could he sit still? He also hurriedly got up and went to the imperial study. Just as he walked out of the barbican, he bumped into Zhang Sun Wuji, Wei Zhang, and Du Ruhui. When the three of them saw Feng Xianling coming out of the barbican, they asked in surprise, "Master Feng Yu?" Feng Xianling stroked his beard speechlessly. "Yu Qigong just took me inside." Their expressions became strange, but they didn't say anything. Zhang Sun Wuji cupped his hands and said, "Let's go. I know you're also going to the emperor. Let's go together." Feng Xianling was surprised. "Why are you going to the emperor's place?" Zhang Sun Wuji glared. "You don't know? We just received news that the envoys from Tubo and Tuyuhun have entered the city. You don't know? How could Feng Xianling know this? He had just come out of Zhang Feng's little tavern and bumped into this fool. Now that he bumped into these three, how could he know? Feng Xianling cupped his hands. Let's go. We'll talk as we walk. Master Zhang Sun, are the envoys from Tubo here because of the internal strife? Zhang Sun nodded with a serious expression. Yes, it's because of this. But just now, Old Man saw Old Black Cheng and the other two leaving the palace in a hurry. What's the meaning of this? Feng Xianling sighed. Your Majesty wants to start a war. What? The three of them heard this. He couldn't help but be shocked. The Emperor actually wants to start a war? Start a war? How is this possible? Does His Majesty not know the current situation of the Tang dynasty? How could they start a war like this? When the three of them heard this, they knew that this matter was indeed serious. They stopped talking and hurried to the imperial study. Before the group of people could report to the eunuch at the door of the imperial study, Xiao Gizi hurriedly indicated for them to enter. Li Shimin had been waiting in the imperial study for a long time. As soon as the four of them entered, Li Shimin asked directly, Now, what do you think about Tubo's matter? Should we start a war or not? When Feng Xianling heard this, he hurriedly bowed and said, Your Majesty, this is a serious matter. This old subject just met General Cheng and the other two. From their conversation, I learned that the army is seriously short of food. Many soldiers only eat 2 bowls of porridge every day. Under such circumstances, they don't dare to go to war. Moreover, without military supplies, how can we start a war? Besides, if we force ourselves to go to war, it will inevitably lead to a strong counterattack from the Tuyuhun, the Turks and even India. We've lost God's will. Li Shimin was angry. He threw the secret letters in front of him to the 4 of them. This is the intelligence sent by the spy just now. I'm sure you know the situation in Tubo and other places. Moreover, Tuli has transferred 100,000 elites from the Yuzhou garrison to the western region. I don't need to say anything about this, do I? If we don't start a war now, do you want to wait until the Turks invade Tubo before going to war? Li Shimin was angry. Wei Zhang and the others couldn't help but be shocked by his insistence on starting a war. Wei Zhang hurriedly said, Your Majesty, although we can go to war now, we just received a report that Tubo and Tuyuhun's envoys are about to enter Chang'an City. It seems that they are here to ask for help. Moreover, it's not appropriate for us to go to war now. Li Shimin frowned slightly. They came at this time? Li Shimin's eyes could not help but flash with killing intent. If they wanted to come, why would Tubo delay until now? Why did they only come now? What did this mean? It meant that they were afraid that the Tang dynasty would suddenly send troops at this time, so they wanted to find out the situation and ask for help from the Tang dynasty. This was really a good plan. At this time, Li Shimin's desire to start a war was slightly weakened. It would be better if Tubo didn't send people, but now that they came, he couldn't help but have some concerns. He knew that this was a stalling tactic, but Tubo was obviously on guard against the Tang dynasty. This was really despicable. On the one hand, they made trouble at the border, and now they were on guard against the Tang dynasty and came to ask for help. Damn it! Seeing that Li Shimin didn't speak, Wei Zhang continued, Your Majesty, the most important thing now is to see what Tubo wants to do. As for the war, the Tang dynasty's situation really doesn't allow us to start a war. Once we start a war, the lack of supplies will be completely exposed. At that time, Li Shimin heard this. He couldn't help but clench his fists. But how could he not know this? Alas! Li Shimin sighed and said, Forget it, forget it. Let's see what they say tomorrow morning. You can all leave now. Chapter 641. Dong! When the clock struck the 3rd time at 5 o'clock, the clock slowly rang. A sharp and cold voice sounded in the political announcement hall. The Emperor has arrived. As the voice fell, the officials hurriedly bowed and shouted in unison. Welcome, Your Majesty. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Li Shimin slowly walked up the 8-step stairway to heaven. He sat on the dragon throne and waved his hand indifferently. At this moment, Li Shimin's condition was not good. After all, no one would be in a good mood after a night without sleep, let alone Li Shimin, who was about to be removed from his heart. Li Shimin's red eyes swept around indifferently. Then he said indifferently, Do you have a report to present today? Your Majesty, this old official has a report to present. The moment Li Shimin's voice fell, Wei Zhang hurriedly stepped forward. Li Shimin waved his hand. Wei Zhang then said, Your Majesty, yesterday, the envoy from Tubo, Nari Tu, and the envoy from Tuyuhun Jiaku have already settled down in the Honglu Temple. They are now outside the palace, asking to see Your Majesty. What are they here for? Your Majesty, do you still remember the drought and the locust plague in Tubo? Because of these two disasters, Tubo is now in the same situation as the Tang dynasty. They are extremely short of food, and it has become so serious that civil unrest has broken out. Li Shimin pretended to be surprised and looked around at the crowd. The crowd only cared about avoiding Li Shimin's gaze. Li Shimin could not help but secretly despise these people. In the end, Li Shimin swept his gaze over Yuqi Gong and the other two, asking, General Yuqi, is this true? Yuqi Gong reluctantly walked out of the queue and said, Your Majesty, what Prime Minister Wei said is true. Not only that, General Li Jing of Yuzhou has sent news that Tuli has dispatched 100,000 elites, but his purpose is not pure. According to the news from Longyu Dao, Longyou's border has often been harassed by Tubo's rebels and soldiers. They are so annoyed that many places in our Tang dynasty have been plundered. Thus, this old general believes that the Turks must have dispatched their troops to take down Tubo. Hearing this, all the ministers in the political announcement hall were shocked. What? The Turks are simply too ambitious. Your Majesty, send the troops. Attack. No. Right now, our Tang dynasty is also extremely short of food. If we send troops now, it will only bring a heavier burden to the people. When all the old ministers heard this, they could not help but burst into an uproar. There was no other way. If the Turks really sent troops to take down Tubo, then wouldn't the Tang dynasty be in imminent danger? If they did not send troops now, then Tubo would definitely not be able to stop the Turks. Because of the Tang dynasty's plan against Tubo, they would lose all their property in Tubo. How could they not be anxious? But once they sent troops, then the consequences. Who would dare to think about it? Therefore, at this time, everyone fell into an endless struggle. Li Shimin was annoyed and snorted coldly. In an instant, everyone's discussion came to an abrupt end. Dear ministers, what do you think now? This time, Tubo must have come because of the 100,000 Turks. Do you think we should help them or not? This, Feng Xianling, Du Ruhui, and the others were silent at this time because they already knew the result of this matter, but the emperor was now testing them. He wanted to test the foundation of these old guys. Sure enough, after a while of hesitation, the minister of the Ministry of Work said, Your Majesty, this matter needs to be discussed again. Our Tang dynasty is suffering from a food shortage at this time, so it's not good to mobilize the troops. Then let me ask you, once the Turks send troops, what should we do? That person was speechless. At this time, the officials who had prepared some words could not help but swallow back their words. That's right. If we don't help, then once the Turks take down Tubo, the door of the Tang dynasty will be completely open to the Turks. At that time, the Turks will come and go as they want, and we will not be able to do anything to them. What should we do? This is a serious problem. At this time, another official said, Your Majesty, even if the Turks really take down Tubo, it does not mean that they will attack our Tang dynasty. Moreover, now that the Turks are also suffering from a plague of locusts, they should be more in need of food than our Tang dynasty. Cattle, sheep, and horses are almost out of food. How can they have the energy to start a war? Li Shimin wanted to kill someone. However, he still suppressed the impatience in his heart and asked, Tell me your opinion. Hearing this, that person said, In fact, to put it bluntly, this is all because of the lack of food. Even if they can start a war against Tubo, in the end, both sides will suffer in the end. Moreover, Tubo does not have food at this time. In this way, even if they take down Tubo. Without waiting for him to finish, Li Shimin speechlessly interrupted this stubborn old man. Okay, I know what you mean. Then Li Shimin rubbed his forehead, looked at Wei Zhang and said, Prime Minister Wei, you said that Tubo's envoys are here. Wei Zhang cupped his hands and said, They are here, waiting for the summons outside the hall. Summon them. Yes. Hearing this, Xiao Gizi waved the whisk in his hand and shouted in a sharp voice, Summon Tubo's envoys, Nari Tu and Tuyuhun's envoys, Jiaku. Chapter 642. Summon Tubo's envoy Naoritu and Tuyuhun's envoy Zack. Summon. The Imperial Guards passed the Imperial Edict one by one. A moment later, two people in Tubo's distinctive costumes hurried into the political announcement hall. Unlike the previous court meetings, the two envoys lowered their posture and bowed as soon as they entered the political announcement hall. They did not dare to look at the faces of Li Shimin and the others. After taking 10 steps into the political announcement hall, the two of them stopped and bowed in the etiquette of the Tang dynasty's officials meeting the monarch. They said, "Tubo's envoy Naoritu and Zack pay respects to your majesty Tang emperors." Li Shimin waved his hand faintly as if nothing had happened. "Dispense with the formalities. Come and sit down." As Li Shimin's voice fell, the little eunuch hurriedly brought 2 futons and placed them on both sides of the center of the hall. After the two of them thanked Li Shimin, they sat down with trepidation. "For what reason have the two of you come to my great Tang?" Before the two of them could sit down, Li Shimin's voice made them hurriedly stand up again. Naoritu hurriedly took out a gilded letter of credence from his arms and said, "This is a letter written by Songtsen Gambu to your majesty. I hope your majesty Tang emperors can read it." Zack also hurriedly got up, took out a letter of credence from his arms, and handed it to Xiao Gizi. After a thorough examination of the martial arts, it was presented in front of Li Shimin. Li Shimin did not read the letter of credence immediately, because he knew that the content of the letter of credence was nothing more than inviting the Tang dynasty to send troops and so on. Li Shimin casually put the letter of credence on the desk in front of him, then put his hands on it. Instead, he looked at the two of them and asked, "What brings you here this time?" The two of them looked at each other. Only then did Naoritu say, "Replying to your majesty, Tubo is in great trouble this time, so my king sent this humble subject to ask for help from the Tang emperors. I hope that your majesty can give us some help for the sake of our friendship." "What kind of disaster did you encounter? If there is a food shortage, then you can go back. When you came to Chang'an, you should have seen that the Tang dynasty is basically the same as Tubo. You want to help? Just you wait." Sure enough, after hearing Li Shimin's words, Naoritu and Zack did not have any reaction. Instead, they were silent for a while before they said, "Your Majesty, we are also aware of the current situation of the Tang dynasty. Therefore, we did not come here to ask for food or anything like that. Instead, we are here to ask your Majesty to send troops to suppress the rebellion in the territory for the sake of the diplomatic relations between the two countries." Li Shimin's eyes flashed. His eyes flashed with shock. Rebellion? Yes. Previously, because of the shortage of food, I am ashamed to say it out loud. The people in my territory are rebelling, and our army is short of food. It is really... Not only that, now India and the Turks are eyeing us covetously. Originally, this humble subject was ready to leave a month ago. However, there is some unrest at the border now, so this humble subject can only return to Yunqing first and wait for your majesty to pacify the border before coming out. However, this rebellion is too rampant, so it has been delayed until now. Since force did not work, was he trying to use soft tactics? Li Shimin glanced at Yu Qigong and Chang Yaojin. Chang Yaojin did not make a sound. Instead, he used his foot to stomp hard on Qin Qiong's instep. Qin Qiong groaned in pain. Li Shimin pointed at Qin Qiong and said, "Dear Qin Qiong, do you have something to report?" What could Qin Qiong say? If he could not understand this matter, then he would not be able to survive. Qin Qiong cupped his fists and said, "Your Majesty, this humble subject has received an urgent report from the garrison of Longyu and Jiannan. It is said that the places near Tubo and Tuyuhun have been plundered several times in this month. There have even been small-scale conflicts. Many people of the Tang dynasty have been killed and injured, and the number of people who have been plundered is no less than 5,000. Li Shimin heard this. He looked at Naoritu with a dignified face and said, "This is the small conflict you told me about? What are my people of the Tang dynasty in your eyes? There is no need to talk about sending troops to help. I will give you 5 days to leave the Tang dynasty. Otherwise, you will be arrested as Tubo spies." The Tang dynasty. Before Naoritu could say anything, Li Shimin waved his sleeve. "Go! Do you think you can get me to send out my troops with just a few words? You must be thinking too much, right?" When Naoritu and Zack heard Li Shimin's words, their faces changed greatly. They hurriedly knelt on the ground and shouted, "Your Majesty, this humble subject came here on behalf of our king. We are willing to sign a permanent vassal state with the Tang dynasty. Moreover, we will share all the military expenses and provisions for the Tang dynasty's help. What? He still has money and provisions? All the ministers were shocked. At this time, everyone felt more and more that this matter was unusual. Logically speaking, if such a thing really happened, they could resist it as long as they had provisions and supplies. Why did they need the Tang dynasty to help? If they had not heard Yu Qigong mention Tuli's movements before, they would only think that there was something wrong with this matter. But now, Li Shimin and Wei Zhang looked at each other. A touch of surprise flashed through their eyes. He said lightly, "Are you sure about this?" Chapter 643. Na Ritu didn't understand Li Shimin's meaning and nodded. "This matter is written in the letter of credence." Li Shimin glanced at Na Ritu with a faint smile, then looked at Wei Zhang and the others and asked, "Dear officials, what do you think?" Wei Zhang's eyelids twitched. The emperor's heart is wild again. Does he really want to start a war? Reporting to your majesty, this old subject feels that we still need to discuss this matter. If we rashly send out troops, as the envoy said, India and the other countries are all waiting for us. If our great Tang sends out troops now, wouldn't that be the same as declaring war with India? Du Ruhui and Feng Xianling also hurriedly bowed and said, "Your Majesty, please reconsider." Seeing that these people had spoken, the officials in the court also hurriedly shouted, "Your Majesty, please reconsider." What a joke. They had a large family and a lot of businesses. At this time, because they had opened up trade with Zhenla, Tubo, and other countries, they had more businesses. If they started a war at this time, then their losses would be really big. They didn't dare to say it before because these important people of the emperor didn't say anything. They didn't dare to be the first ones. But now that they had spoken, what should they do? They also hurriedly dissuaded. Li Shimin heard this and couldn't help but frown. However, he also knew that this matter couldn't be rushed. He waved his hand lightly and said, "You can stay in the Honglu temple for the time being. I know about this matter, but this is a serious matter. Let me think about it first. After 3 days, I will give you an answer whether it's successful or not." Na Ritu and Du Ruhui heaved a deep sigh of relief after hearing this. They hurriedly bowed and then left. After the two left, Li Shimin also didn't want to continue the morning court. He waved his hand and Xiao Gizi hurriedly said, "Court is dismissed." When everyone was slowly walking out, several little eunuchs called Wei Zhang and the others. When they followed the little eunuchs to the imperial study, Li Shimin was standing on the map and looking at it. When they entered the imperial study, Li Shimin pointed to the 2 opened letters of credence on the desk and said, "Take a look at these 2 letters of credence first." Hearing this, they picked up the 2 letters of credence and read them. The contents of the letters of credence were more or less the same. They just wanted to submit and ask the Tang dynasty to send troops to help them to suppress the rebels in their territory and resist the strong enemies who coveted them. As for the last clause mentioned in the map, it was not mentioned in the letter. It only said that if it was possible, the envoys could choose the best one, and it would be considered as their king's permission. What a sly old fox. After they finished reading it, they couldn't help cursing in their hearts. Fortunately, the emperor didn't agree just now. If he did, then it was this moment of hesitation that allowed them to save a large amount of military supplies. If what they said was true, their soldiers wouldn't have to go hungry anymore. After a quarter of an hour, Li Shimin slowly turned around and looked at the people with different expressions. He first asked Yu Qigong and the other 2, "Yu Qi, do you 3 think we should fight this war or help?" Yu Qigong hesitated for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, if we want to help, it's possible. We only need to send 100,000 well-equipped soldiers without provisions. If what they said is true, then we will have at least 100,000 don of provisions left for our army." "I'm afraid." Yu Qigong paused. Seeing that Li Shimin didn't say anything, he continued, "If we want to fight, I think it's really not appropriate to do it now." "Why?" Li Shimin asked. Yu Qigong pointed at the map on the wall and said, "Your Majesty, please look at this map. If what the emperor said is true, then India and the Turks are attacking us from both sides. If Tubo asks us to help, they will definitely be on guard. If we take advantage of this opportunity to enter Tubo's rear and take Tubo, we will force Tubo into a life-and-death struggle. In this way, We will be attacking them from 3 sides. The most crucial thing is that we don't have any provisions. If we fight, we will be in danger of being completely wiped out. If something happens to these 100,000 soldiers, the Western Gate will be completely lost. Li Shimin's eyes turned cold at Yu Qigong's words. They couldn't fight. This was a rare opportunity. If they didn't fight now, they wouldn't be able to find another chance like this in the future. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Sun Wuji and the others and asked, Minister Zhang Sun, what do you think? What could Zhang Sun Wuji say? If they fought now, it would definitely harm others without benefiting themselves. However, the emperor's attitude was so firm that he didn't know what to say. Since the emperor asked, he could only bite the bullet and say, Your Majesty, this old subject also thinks that we can help, but we can't fight this battle. Li Shimin was completely speechless. They couldn't fight all of them. Was the army he had deployed at Longyu Road just for show? He didn't dare to do this, he didn't dare to do that. What else could he do? Li Shimin was a little frustrated. He waved his hand and said, You all are dismissed. Let me think about it. Chapter 644. Zhang Feng had been very busy these days. He was so busy that his heels were barely touching the back of his feet. He had found more than a dozen craftsmen to make an ordinary compass. They had talked until their mouths were sore, and they had even drawn the required items on a wooden board. The craftsmen were still not satisfied with the result. A few triangular boards were crooked. Zhang Feng had no choice but to spend a large sum of money to buy a batch of rice paper and cut it into the required size. Then, he used a thin bamboo stick to burn it with an oil lamp to make a simple pencil. He used a small knife to sharpen it and mark it on the paper. It took him at least a day to make the templates for the triangular boards, compasses, and other things. He had wanted to make them out of iron or glass, but how could the craftsman of this time do that? So, he could only settle for the next best thing. However, as he gave up again and again, these craftsmen, who were called the best carpenters in Chang'an City except for the Ministry of Works, could not make them. At this moment, just as Zhang Feng was worrying, the housekeeper of the Zhang mansion knocked on the door of the small tavern in a hurry. Son-in-law! Son-in-law! Zhang Feng's face darkened when he heard that. But he still opened the door. What's the matter? Call me Zhang Feng or Prince Zhang. Can you not call me son-in-law? The old housekeeper smiled honestly. Yes, son-in-law. Zhang Feng was speechless. What's the matter? Old master heard that son-in-law is looking for skilled carpenters in the city, so he specially asked me to ask if you have found any. If you haven't found any, the Zhang mansion has taken in a carpenter who used to work for the Ministry of Works. Zhang Feng's eyes lit up when he heard that. The Zhang family had been operating in Chang'an City for many years and had some contact with the palace. In terms of connections, they must be much better than those old soldiers. Plus, this person used to work for the Ministry of Works. What did that mean? Zhang Feng could not help but ask, Where is this person now? As he spoke, Zhang Feng hurriedly welcomed the steward into the house. When he saw the steward sitting down, the steward was so scared that his entire body was trembling. This was the Marquis who was famous in Chang'an at this time. How could the officials bear to be welcomed by the Marquis in person? He hurriedly sat down and said, Young master, this old carpenter is currently renovating the old house in master's hometown Lantian. If you think it's okay, I'll go to the old house and invite him over for you. No need, no need. Zhang Feng rubbed his hands. Lantian isn't far from Shao Mountain. How about this? I'll give you these blueprints. I'll have to trouble you to personally make a trip to Lantian and see if the old craftsman can make it. If he can, send him directly to White Deer College in Shao Mountain. If you can't do it, how about we think of another way? Then I'll go now. The steward hurriedly rushed out of the pub with the blueprint in his arms. Just as he was about to walk out of the tavern, he bumped into Li Shimin's arms. Li Shimin almost fell to the ground. Seeing this, Zhang Feng was also a little confused. He hurriedly supported Li Shimin and asked, Lao Li, why are you here? Don't you know the trick? Li Shimin took a breath and looked at the trembling steward and the things in his arms. His expression softened a little and said, I have to knock on the door to come here, don't I? Zhang Feng scratched his head. Li Shimin pointed to the steward and asked, This is... Steward Zhang is here too. Oh. Li Shimin didn't wait for Zhang Feng to finish his words. He gave a meaningful oh and then held a fist and palm salute to the steward and said, "Then it's all right. Have a good trip." The steward shed tears of gratitude and hurried away. As soon as the steward left, Li Shimin sat on the stool and rubbed his chest. He asked, "What's wrong with this old man? Why is he in such a hurry? I heard that you almost overturned Chang'an City these 2 days and looked for carpenters all over the city." "Why?" Zhang Feng pointed to the old steward. "It's because I want to make some precision teaching aids. In such a big Chang'an City, I can't find a skilled one." Fortunately, the Zhang family learned about this and said that they took in an old carpenter who used to work in the Ministry of Works. They asked me if I wanted him. What kind of teaching aids are so difficult to make? As far as I know, the musical house in Chang'an City sells all kinds of things. Li Shimin was confused. Zhang Feng shrugged and sighed. "Forget it. Let's not talk about this. I haven't seen you these days. What have you been busy with? Isn't it because of the famine? A lot of people are starving. Have you solved it?" Li Shimin smiled and shook his head. "If it hadn't been solved, how could I come here to have fun?" Zhang Feng nodded knowingly. "Well, since you're here, I'll cook a tortoise for you today." Li Shimin's face turned green. "Tortoise is a curse. And can it be eaten?" "Fengzi, are you cursing me?" Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously. "Wait and you'll know. That thing is very nutritious." Li Shimin smiled speechlessly. "Well, then I'll wait. By the way, do you still have salt and pepper grasshoppers? Give me some. I'll drink first. There's a hidden compartment in the wine cabinet. Save some for me. There's only a little left." Chapter 645. Zhang Feng's tortoise had already been stewing in the pot for a long time. Therefore, it didn't take long for him to prepare 3 dishes and 2 soups in front of Li Shimin. The tempting aroma of the tortoise soup, coupled with the pepper and the taste of a green grass that Li Shimin didn't recognize, instantly made Li Shimin put down the wine bowl in his hand. He picked up the spoon, gently scooped up a spoonful of milky white soup, and took a sip. Instantly, the strong taste opened Li Shimin's taste buds. This time, Li Shimin didn't say a word, which was rare. Zhang Feng could also see that Li Shimin had encountered something, but since Lao Li didn't say anything, he couldn't ask. He could only accompany Li Shimin. After all, he also had a basket of troubles. In the end, the meal was finished. Li Shimin touched his slightly bulging belly, smacked his lips and drank Zhang Feng's unique tea, and said, "Every time I come to your place, I feel that I'm still alive." Zhang Feng smiled. "It seems like you've encountered something again?" Sigh. Li Shimin sighed deeply. "Isn't that so? It's all because of the drought." Zhang Feng was stunned. Could it be that it has something to do with the little yellow gate yesterday, and the Tubo envoy? Li Shimin nodded. "You still don't know, right? Because of the food shortage, there's now a civil rebellion in Tubo, which even lasted from Tuyuhan all the way to Tubo. I heard that the envoy brought news yesterday that as long as the Tang dynasty is near Tubo, it's been looted. You also know that after I started working with Zhenla here, the focus of my business is basically in Tubo. This time I've suffered a great loss." Zhang Feng couldn't help but be a little surprised when he heard this. However, Zhang Feng already had a premonition about this. After all, this rotten idea came from him. At this time, seeing Li Shimin like this, Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder and smiled. "I thought it was something big. Isn't this the one?" Li Shimin's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "This is a small matter? You don't know. Yesterday, I personally went to ask Lord Zhang's son about business matters. Guess what Lord Zhang's son said? According to the Lord Zhang's son, the Tubo's Tuli Khan has mobilized 100,000 elite troops from Yuzhou, while India is also eyeing covetously. The Tubo people are here to ask for help." "So what?" Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin indifferently, clicked his tongue and said, "For such a small matter, your hair has turned white again? Is it necessary?" Li Shimin was speechless. "I say, Fengzi, you really don't mind watching a show. I heard that the emperor wants to go to war. Why are you still making sarcastic remarks here?" Zhang Feng pursed his lips. "Who did you hear that from?" "Lord Zhang's son." "Then you must have misheard. If you don't believe me, Do you dare to make a bet with me? I bet that the emperor will not send troops. Li Shimin was stunned. Chapter 646. Li Shimin naturally understood what Zhang Feng meant. However, this was an opportunity that couldn't be missed. If he missed this opportunity and gave Tubo a chance to struggle at death's door, he would still be an uncertain factor. There might even be some friction between the two sides. Thinking of this, Li Shimin asked, although the outside world knows this, you don't know about the problem at the border. If we can take it down in one fell swoop, although it's a bit shabby, at least we have a good reason to send troops now. But in the future, then, don't worry about this. If the emperor doesn't have a problem here, he won't start a war now. Zhang Feng pointed to his head. Li Shimin was speechless, but he still asked, why do you think the emperor won't start a war? Because the emperor isn't stupid. You know the current situation of Tubo. It's so shabby. If we take over Tubo now, we'll have the right time, place, and people. But the most important thing is that you have to feed them with food from your own pocket. Now, do you think the Tang dynasty has the ability to share the food in its mouth and feed the people in that large piece of land? Definitely not. And there's another important problem that you haven't thought of. I know what Laoli is thinking. After all, your main business now is Tubo. You'll profit the most if you take over Tubo. But have you ever thought about the current situation of the Tang dynasty? Li Shimin didn't even think about it. There's a shortage of food. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin on the shoulder. Yes, there's a shortage of food. Think about it. Now, there's a shortage of food everywhere in the Tang dynasty, let alone in the army. The army is basically stationed at the border of the barren land. Now, Chang'an City has just solved the problem of food and clothing. Do you think the barren land at the border will be better? Li Shimin couldn't help but understand. Why would Chang Yaojin, Yu Qigong, and the others, who had always been warlike, retreat at this time? It turned out that they lacked food. However, Li Shimin still couldn't figure it out. He asked, if we miss this opportunity, won't it be difficult for Tubo to fight again? After all, I heard that Tubo is here to pledge allegiance. What is this? Zhang Feng didn't even think about it. After all, there wasn't much in the future except for television. The more he saw, the more he understood. Although Zhang Feng didn't remember much about this kind of military novels, he could still vaguely remember some things about it. Zhang Feng thought for a moment and said, actually, this thing is very simple. If you really want to take it down, you can do it at any time. Li Shimin pursed his lips and looked at Zhang Feng rolling up his sleeves and putting his feet on the stool. It was obvious that this guy was about to start showing off. However, Li Shimin also wanted to know what this kid was capable of. Li Shimin took the opportunity to ask, then tell me if this thing is over, how should we deal with it? Zhang Feng heard this and patted Li Shimin's shoulder. Laoli, you don't understand this, right? Let me explain it to you. First of all, it's definitely not possible now. I said it last time, and I'll say it again this time. When that piece of junk comes back, you'll have to mend it. Also, this piece of junk might not follow you wholeheartedly. It's like a dog that can't be fed well. What do you want it for? Then how do we deal with it? According to your method, won't it be even more difficult after this famine? Li Shimin asked in surprise. Yes, yes, yes. Zhang Feng smiled slyly. If I say you don't understand this stuff, then you really don't. If you say you don't understand, then why are you still talking here? Isn't it good to do your business properly? Li Shimin's mouth twitched. Isn't it because I don't understand that I have to ask? Otherwise, if there's a big change, won't my business be the first to be affected? When that time comes, I'll be easily affected, and you'll also get less money, right? Also, you need money everywhere now. Li Shimin's words poked Zhang Feng's sore spot. Zhang Feng couldn't help but sigh. Aya! Look at you, why are you talking about this stuff out of the blue? Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, let's not talk about this first. As long as I'm here, you'll be like the turtle in the pot, eating a weight, and you'll be safe. Li Shimin suspected that Zhang Feng was scolding him again, but he still couldn't find any evidence. At this time, Zhang Feng continued, actually, to put it bluntly, it's just that the Tang dynasty isn't strong enough. Look, from the current situation around the Tang dynasty, you can see this point. The Goguryeo in the north, the Sherway in the east, the Japanese pirates, the Turks, and so on are all hidden dangers. Now, there's also India. But these are all small problems, and the most important thing is still that dashi. Dashi? Li Shimin was dumbfounded. What does this have to do with dashi? Zhang Feng stared and said with a faint smile, "It doesn't have anything to do with it, but this is only temporary. After the meridians of the western regions are opened, the reputation of the Tang dynasty will spread far and wide. This dashi, which is on par with the Tang dynasty, will come to touch the Tang dynasty." Chapter 647. And there is a natural barrier between the Tang dynasty and dashi. Li Shimin narrowed his eyes. A map of the territory of the Tang dynasty instantly appeared in his mind. He said, "You mean Tubo?" "Yes. That's why I said it's not the right time to make a move. At this time, once we take Tubo, it will be easier to attack the city than to defend it. You know the current situation. If we recuperate while rescuing them, and then spread out the spies we have in Tubo to form an intelligence network." Li Shimin was shocked. Based on the intelligence reports, the 3,000 or so people that had been sent out before had grown into tens of thousands. Furthermore, these people were all loyal to the spies. These 3,000 people were all distant relatives of the various high dukes. In terms of loyalty, there was generally no problem. But now, Zhang Feng was going to make a move on these spies? Finally, Li Shimin finally understood why Zhang Feng had planted so many spies so early and didn't intend to take Tubo in the end. It turned out that this was the reason. Li Shimin suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked, "Did you think of so many things from the beginning? Then you deliberately spread these 3,000 spies out, let them develop freely, settle down in Tubo, get married, and develop your subordinates?" Zhang Feng's face was a little red. Well, more or less. Seeing this, Li Shimin. He couldn't help but be stunned. "How did you do it? How long has it been since the outbreak of the drought and we went to Tubo for help? And so many things have happened during this time. How can you calculate so accurately? And you can accurately predict that the emperor will really send out spies?" Zhang Feng pointed to his head. Li Shimin was speechless for a while. "Even if you were beaten to death, you would still ask, Fengzi, although what you said makes sense, there's still something I don't understand. Although this matter seems very reasonable, this is an outsider after all. What exactly is he thinking? None of us know." "Wrong!" Zhang Feng interrupted Li Shimin and said, "Although the old saying is correct, those who are not of our race will have different intentions. Don't forget one thing, the principle that whoever has milk is the mother. Right now, people are dying of starvation everywhere in Tubo. I don't believe that when the emperor stockpiled grain, he didn't tell them that the first thing to do in Tubo was stockpiling grain. After all, in this era, whoever controls food has the right to live. For example, I have food in Pyrolite Mountain, but I don't want to pay for it. What should I do? I'll take food and work instead." That's why there are thousands of people marching forward together. What is this? This was based on the philosophy of survival. What gave them hope was that after the construction was completed, their children would be able to see their descendants studying in this academy. What was this? This is hope. If the same principle is used in Tubo now, what do you think they will do? Li Shimin did know that food was precious now. Even in the Tang dynasty, he knew that there were people who used their children or an acre of land in exchange for a bucket of rice. The same principle had happened countless times in the Tang dynasty and even before that. Many people were familiar with it, let alone those from the house of High Duke. How could they not know this? That was impossible. Li Shimin couldn't help but find out that even if they didn't send a single soldier, as long as these 3,000 people seized this opportunity, then in a few years, more than half of Tubo's actual control would be in the hands of the Tang dynasty. Li Shimin exclaimed in shock that it was impossible. "Fengzi, how did you do it? Now that I've combined everything that you've said and everything that happened before, I finally understood this matter. How did you do it? If that's the case, then wouldn't your majesty not need to expend a single soldier? In just a few years, Tibet will naturally become the land of my great Tang?" Zhang Feng smiled contemptuously. "With your brain you only know how to do small business. Do you know why I let your son come to the academy? Although Li Shimin was despised, he also admitted that Zhang Feng's plan was vicious. This was the most vicious plan to exterminate a family. Although he knew that Zhang Feng wanted to exterminate his family, Li Shimin couldn't help but tremble after thinking it through. Whoever dared to be targeted by this guy was simply. Li Shimin started to sympathize with Tubo. However, Li Shimin still asked curiously, Fengzi, what you're saying now seems to be somewhat different from the national policy you mentioned before. It seems to be a bit like the shadow of the Zhuge Testament? Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin in surprise and said, Oh, I couldn't tell. When did Lao Li start to study military books? Li Shimin realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. He laughed and said, Didn't you say that you were going to teach them about heavy cavalry? I had nothing to do, so I read military books. Zhang Feng nodded and then shook his head. That's right, this is indeed a military book. However, what you said is not complete. This is the foundation of White Deer College. Lao Tzu not only wants to teach 9 scholars, but Lao Tzu also wants to cultivate 9 generals. This is the treasure of my college military studies. Chapter 648. What kind of person could think of such a thing? As for what Zhang Feng said about the treasure of the academy, the 9 imperial scholars, and the 9 generals, he automatically ignored it. This kid just liked to show off. But he was not sure. After all, what Zhang Feng said just now was too terrifying. Although he admitted that Zhang Feng was talented, how much could Cheng Chumo and the others learn? It would be good if they could learn a little. However, he was still deeply attracted by the magical military science. After all, this thing, if he thought carefully, seemed to be able to be combined with Zhang Feng until now, such as the strategy to deal with the Turkic Tubo and the other countries, as well as the plan to devise strategies. Although it seemed to be national policy, it was very similar to this so-called military science. After that, he talked about the 8 waters, fine salt, and other legendary things. In fact, in the end, it was all about careful observation in life that could be done. However, not a single person was able to see through it. This was a little scary. However, what Li Shimin was most interested in right now was to personally take a look at this so-called military science book. If there was a book, then no matter how much it would cost, he would get it. What was this thing that was locked in the small cabinet? This was the heirloom of the Li family. Li Shimin could not help but pour a bowl of wine for Zhang Feng and hand it to Zhang Feng. This scene made Zhang Feng very suspicious. What? Come, Fengzi, let's drink? Although Zhang Feng was suspicious, he still drank a bowl of wine with Li Shimin. When Zhang Feng was almost finished, Li Shimin rubbed his hands and asked, Fengzi, what is this military science you said? Can you tell me? How could Zhang Feng not know what Li Shimin was holding back? Seeing this, he folded his hands and asked, What? Are you going to change careers and join the army? You're already so old. Even though we're partners in the academy, I still won't accept you. If news of this were to spread out, saying that I, Zhang Feng, accepted a good brother, a good elder brother, to come to the White Deer Academy to learn, wouldn't my backbone be broken? Well, no, I just want to hear it. Isn't it because I have nothing to do after drinking? Let's just take it as a toast. Moreover, giving pointers to the world and drinking together, what a wonderful thing this is. Zhang Feng heard this and felt that it made a little sense. He smacked his lips and pointed to the kitchen. You want to hear it? There is a pot of braised meat on the stove. Go get it, I am brewing it. Before Zhang Feng finished speaking, Li Shimin got up and rushed into the kitchen. If others were to see this scene, they would be scared out of their wits. The emperor was actually in a small tavern, and in a small tavern in Chang'an City at that, being ordered around by a shopkeeper. Anyone who saw this would definitely think that they were dreaming. However, this was not important to Li Shimin. After all, in this small tavern, he only treated himself as Zhang Feng's elder brother, a good brother. Furthermore, if anyone were to find out about Zhang Feng's godly skills, not to mention getting him to serve a pot of food, even if he had to empty a chamber pot, there would still be people willing to do so. What was this? What Zhang Feng was going to talk about was a type of military knowledge that had never been mentioned in military books. Not long later, Li Shimin brought out the fine salt bowl and placed it on the table. He even placed a large amount of beer and white wine on the table. Then, he sat at the seat closest to Zhang Feng and looked at Zhang Feng. If it weren't for the fact that Zhang Feng's foot was on the stool, He would have wanted to sit beside Zhang Feng. At this moment, Zhang Feng ate a piece of pork intestine and said unhurriedly, "Actually, I have a different set of ideas about military knowledge here. Furthermore, for something to appear in my White Deer College, I can guarantee that this is definitely something that has never been seen before in history. It's like this. Wait, I'll call someone in to record it." When Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng was about to start nagging again, he hurriedly interrupted Zhang Feng. He rushed to the front of the small tavern and shouted, "Gizi, come quickly." Little Gizi, who was hiding in the dark, trembled. He hurriedly tidied himself up and appeared in the small tavern like a normal person. "Quickly record every word that Brother Zhang Feng says. If you dare to miss a single word, go back and break one of your legs." Little Gizi's face turned pale. He hurriedly called in 3 little eunuchs to help. Then, while Zhang Feng was bragging and talking about this matter, one of them hurriedly recorded the emperor's words while the other 2 recorded Zhang Feng's words. Even so, the 3 of them were drenched in sweat. F***ck, this beast. Can't you speak more slowly? Zhang Feng rambled on for a long time. Li Shimin was also annoyed. However, he didn't dare to interrupt. He could only continuously pour wine into Zhang Feng's mouth. After a quarter of an hour, Zhang Feng finally spoke eloquently about modern military knowledge and a set of ideas about military training. When Zhang Feng finished speaking, Li Shimin was completely dumbfounded. In his mind, there was only one sentence that kept repeating over and over again. Heavens! Soldiers can be trained like this? If that's the case, doesn't that mean that the things we learned before are all dog's hit? Chapter 649. 2 hours later. After telling the story, Zhang Feng was finally knocked to the ground by Li Shimin's beer. Looking at Zhang Feng, who was sleeping and snoring, Xiao Tianyu waved his hand. Li Shimin waved his hand in shock. In an instant, 2 maids disguised as maids appeared at the door. They hurriedly helped Zhang Feng to the backyard to wash up. If Zhang Feng was sober, he would never dare to fall asleep. No matter how drunk he was, he had to hold on. After all, how could the maids who could follow Li Shimin and serve Li Shimin be ugly? Moreover, 2 of them were serving him in the bath. This was simply. However, this was not important. Li Shimin looked at the information recorded on the thick sheets of paper in his hand, and his hands could not help trembling. Good, Gizi, you did well. You 2 did well too. Come and reward these 2 eunuchs. As Li Shimin spoke, the Jinwu guards hurriedly appeared and broke the necks of the 2 eunuchs who were kneeling on the ground to express their gratitude. Little Gizi seemed to have been aware of this, or he seemed to be used to it. After all, what was this about? This was a big secret. If someone with ulterior motives had the information in Li Shimin's hands, then the Tang dynasty would be in danger. Li Shimin absolutely did not want to see this happen. Little Gizi knew. After dealing with the 2 eunuchs, Li Shimin turned to look at Zhang Feng, who was being washed by 2 maids in a big pot with a burning fire, and said lightly, "Today, you 2 stay and serve him well." After that, Li Shimin hurriedly left. After all, he always felt that holding such a thing in his hand was as heavy as Mount Tai. When he walked out of the tavern, Li Shimin let out a deep breath. He plunged into the palanquin that had arrived in a hurry and left. Little Gizi stared deeply at Zhang Feng with a complicated expression. "Brat, you're really lucky to be able to get the emperor's favor." Xiao Gizi was Li Shimin's personal servant. He naturally knew how important Zhang Feng was to Li Shimin. Moreover, in Xiao Gizi's opinion, the emperor was always alone, especially after the incident at the Xuanwu Gate. The emperor became even more lonely. He was even a little depressed. After that, the emperor went through the Wei River Alliance, which was the last straw that broke Li Shimin's back. However, these were all things before Zhang Feng appeared. After Zhang Feng's appearance, not to mention the emperor, the current Chang and city, and even the entire Tang dynasty, became vigorous and different. For example, the previous Tang dynasty was like an old man covered in scars. After Zhang Feng's appearance, the whole thing changed. Although Xiao Gizi couldn't say anything, he always felt that everything in the world was in the emperor's hands. Xiao Gizi gently closed the door of Zhang Feng's tavern, told a Jinwu guard to guard Zhang Feng all night, and hurriedly followed Li Shimin's palanquin. Chapter 650. Old Hey. Can you King hurry up? You're dawdling like a girl. The next morning. In Chang Yaojin's residence, Yuchi Gong's loud voice reverberated in the huge duke's residence, causing all the servants to tremble in fear. In the courtyard, Yuchi Gong, Qin Qiong and Qin Shubao, who had changed into casual attire, were waiting anxiously like a black tower. Ever since they found out about Zhang Feng's incident 2 days ago, their hearts had already flown to Zhang Feng's little tavern. However, because of Tubo's incident, they did not dare to be careless. They could only suppress the restlessness in their hearts and wait. However, this wait was unbearable. During this period, they had also inquired about Zhang Feng. When they found out that the miraculous porridge with bone-strengthening powder and chicken, duck, and pig's gizzard was made by Zhang Feng, how could they sit still? Behind them, there were tens of thousands of brothers who were starving. How could such a good thing be given to the damned commoners and let the soldiers starve? That was why after the morning court meeting ended, the two of them couldn't wait to carry Chang Yaojin all the way back to the duke's public house. The moment they entered, they took off their official robes and pointed at two Chang Yaojin who were about the same size as them and helped them change into their robes. After dressing up like this, Yuchi Gong, who was already ferocious and had a face full of curly beard, really looked like a nouveau riche. It was just that he looked like a bandit who made a fortune. Qin Qiong was slightly better. After all, he was born handsome. Although he was old and wore a military uniform all year round, when he put on the brocade robes, he instantly looked like a businessman. Amidst Yuchi Gong's angry shouts and curses, Chang Yaojin dawdled out of the room. He patted the brand-new jade belt on his big belly and reluctantly stretched. Let's go. You're so impatient. I've already said that this kid is still sleeping. You don't believe me? Let's go eat the northwest wind. Just like that, the three of them were too lazy to even ride horses. After all, those things were too ostentatious. Just like that, Chang Yaojin and Yuchi Gong continued on their way, cursing and swearing. The shocked crowd was forced to retreat, thinking that bandits had entered the city. Although it was still early in the morning market of Chang'an City was still bustling with activity. However, there were many people selling, and as for the people buying, there were basically not many people. The Guangzhong people had a bad habit. He didn't know where it came from. Early in the morning, he would carry a teapot or a birdcage and wander around the streets. When he met an acquaintance, he would brag about it and then walk away. Although their stomachs were growling from hunger, they still couldn't get rid of their bad habit of wandering around. When Yuchi Gong's extraordinary height appeared on the street, he instantly attracted everyone's attention. However, when they looked at Yuchi Gong's curly beard, which still had traces of grease on it, coupled with his ferocious appearance, the entire street instantly fell silent. The three of them didn't seem to be surprised. Each of them was holding a large handful of roasted chicken legs, and several bamboo beer cans were hanging from their shoulders with hemp ropes. While eating, they bragged about what had happened beyond the Great Wall. When the three of them walked to the small tavern, they touched their stomachs and their faces were very red. Chang Yaojin pointed at Zhang Feng's closed door and said, "See, I told you that this kid doesn't get up until noon. Even if he gets up, it's because he has to urinate. You didn't believe me? Let's go, let's find a jar of fermented glutinous rice to moisten our throats. There was a damn dumpling stall here before." When Yuchi Gong heard that there was dumpling, he touched his huge belly and looked around. Where is it? Lao Tzu hasn't eaten dumplings in Chang'an for a long time. Chang Yaojin broke a branch to pick his teeth and said, "He went to Xingshan Academy with this kid. I heard that he's learning something about mathematics from the kid from the Du family." Yuchi Gong stared. How is that possible? Did all the people in Tong Hui Fong go there? Along the way, only this Tong Hui Fong was special. What was different? It was just that on the road, there wasn't even a damn barbecue stall, not to mention people strolling around. Now Yuchi Gong finally understood what was going on here. It turned out that they had all gone up the mountain to eat some kind of porridge. The three of them had just drunk a lot of beer and squatted on the road for a while. Instantly, their expressions became unnatural. They looked around, trying to find a place to pee, but there was no place. In the end, under Chang Yaojin's horrified gaze, this silly guy directly kicked Zhang Feng's door to pieces. And in the midst of this loud noise, the Jinwu guards who had stayed behind to protect Zhang Feng hurriedly jumped out. But when they saw that it was Yu Qigong, they were so scared that their legs trembled. They hurriedly bowed and gestured for him to leave. Then they hurriedly ran away. Zhang Feng, who was sleeping soundly, thought that there was an earthquake when he heard this loud noise. He was stunned and hurriedly ran out. But in front of him, he saw a black wall rushing towards him. "Kid, where's the outhouse?" When Yu Qigong saw a disheveled teenager running out as soon as he entered the door, he only thought that he was a waiter. He picked up Zhang Feng like he was picking up a chick and asked. Zhang Feng was stunned. Pointing at the backyard behind him, Yu Qigong let go, and Zhang Feng instantly fell on his butt. At this time, while Zhang Feng's face was full of question marks, Cheng Yaojin walked in with an awkward expression. Zhang Feng pointed at the person behind him and asked, "Old Chen, who's this silly guy?" Chapter 651. Zhang Feng was completely dumbfounded. He was sleeping in his own house. Not only was the door smashed, but he was also lifted up and asked about the bathroom. "Damn you! Is that all? It's so early in the morning? Can't you solve the problem outside the door? Why are you so anxious? F***ck your second uncle." Cheng Yaojin was known for his thick skin, but at this time, he couldn't help but blush. "Well, Fengzi this." "Well, you can call him Old Yu. Oh, by the way, let me introduce you. This is Old Qin." How could Zhang Feng care about this now? His mind was full of that silly girl. He couldn't help but feel angry now. He casually greeted the two of them, then hurriedly went into the bedroom, ready to put on the clothes of the Great Confucian and come out to show off. Qin Qiong was also a little dumbfounded. Seeing Zhang Feng enter the bedroom, he pointed at Zhang Feng and asked, "The person you are talking about, is he?" Cheng Yaojin was speechless. He looked at Qin Qiong and said, "What do you think?" This time, Qin Qiong was also speechless. Let's not talk about this for the time being. Let's talk about Zhang Feng. After being drunk by Old Li yesterday, he didn't know what was going on. Just now, he heard a loud noise and walked out of the door in a daze. Then, he met such an idiot. Now, he didn't feel sleepy at all. When he returned to the bedroom again, he was completely stunned. He saw two beautiful women standing in front of his bed. Although the two of them were wearing servant girls' dresses, they still couldn't hide their graceful figures and their charming faces. Although the Tang dynasty advocated the beauty of plump bodies, it was all because they didn't have enough to eat before. Therefore, in order to show the wealth of the Tang dynasty, Li Shimin said that plump bodies were beautiful and let the world see the wealth of the Tang dynasty. It was all because of this year's locust plague that they started to take shape. But now, because of Zhang Feng's appearance, Li Shimin seemed to have forgotten about the beauty of plump breasts. After all, who would like a fatty? There was no one. Looking at these two women, although they couldn't compare with Jing Shu or Zhang Yuyao, they were still rare beauties. But why would these two women appear in his room? What was going on? Zhang Feng was dumbfounded. When the two women saw Zhang Feng looking at them in a daze, they couldn't help but lower their cheeks and perform the palace etiquette. "Servant little Yao and Yao Hong greet Prince Zhang." "Huh. About that, I want to ask, where am I? What have I done before?" Zhang Feng was dumbfounded and completely at a loss. The two women wanted to laugh, but they also understood the importance of this person in the emperor's heart. One of them was called Tao Hong. Her face was very round, and he didn't know whether her cheeks were painted with rouge or were naturally red. Anyone who looked at her would want to pinch her cheeks. At this time Tao Hong said, "Prince Zhang was drunk yesterday, so I and Master asked us to stay and serve Prince Zhang." Damn it! Zhang Feng naturally understood what it meant to serve. He hurriedly lifted the quilt subconsciously and saw that the bedsheet was still gray as before. Only then did he breathe a deep sigh of relief, but he also sighed a little. Didn't they say that if the people of the Tang dynasty were served by maids, it meant Mother ****. All these history books and novels are ****king liars. Under the strange eyes of the two women, Zhang Feng sat on the bed and said embarrassedly, "Well, do you want to stay? Or go back?" "Of course we want to go back." Tao Hong pursed her lips, held back her laughter and said, "Of course if young master wants us to stay and serve you, my master will also agree." There was such a good thing? Brother, Zhang Feng was originally very excited, But when he thought of Chantiniu and the other idiots, although he really wanted the two women to stay, he forced himself to pretend to be a gentleman and said reluctantly, "I don't need you for the time being. If I need you, I will ask Lao Li for you too." When Tao Hong and Little Yao heard this, a touch of disappointment flashed in their eyes, but they recovered in a flash. After all, to be able to stand out among so many maids in the palace, they naturally had some ability to serve Li Shimin. The two women bowed again and were ready to leave, but Zhang Feng stopped them. "Well, I don't know how to wear this robe. Can you help me put it on?" "Okay, Prince Zhang." When the two women heard this, they covered their mouths and chuckled, then picked up the neatly folded robe. However, when the two women shook the robe, their faces changed dramatically. They had naturally seen the robe of the great scholar. At this time, seeing it again, and it was in Zhang Feng's place, the two women couldn't help but be deeply shocked. However, the two women didn't say anything. They just let Zhang Feng do a good job, combed Zhang Feng's long hair, and changed his clothes. Zhang Feng just sat there and let the two women serve him. Except for the cloth in his crotch, they changed everything for him. At this time, Zhang Feng also realized that his original cloth in his crotch was gone, and the one he was wearing now was the one he was going to throw away before. Could it be? Zhang Feng suddenly thought of something and pointed to his chest. "What happened to my clothes?" Replying to Prince Zhang, "You were drunk yesterday, and my master asked us to help you take a bath." Although Zhang Feng's skin was extremely thick, he couldn't help but blush when he heard it. Originally, he wanted to experience the feeling of a rich family. He didn't expect that this was really embarrassing. Chapter 652. Zhang Feng acted as if he was fleeing from a disaster. After the two women changed their clothes, he hurriedly walked out of the bedroom. The two women were very polite and didn't say anything. When they came out, they saw Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong, who had just solved a big problem, and couldn't help but be stunned. However, the two women also saw that it was a big matter, so they only bowed and then hurriedly left. At that moment, Yu Qigong was a little confused. He then took a closer look at Zhang Feng. It would have been better if he did not look, but when he did, he was instantly shocked. This kid was actually wearing the clothes of a great scholar? Yu Qigong had naturally seen the two women before. They were Li Shimin's personal palace maids. What did it mean that they had come out of Zhang Feng's bedroom? He saw that Zhang Feng was ignoring him and standing straight at the door, looking outside with his hands behind his back. Yu Qigong asked suspiciously, "Old Black, who is this kid?" Cheng Yaojin glanced at Yu Qigong and snorted as a reply. This made Yu Qigong feel as if his heart was being scratched by a cat. Although Zhang Feng was looking outside, his ears were perked up as he carefully listened to the conversation between the two. When he heard that Old Black was actually so awesome, he could not help but praise him in his heart. This iron tower of a fool should be taught a lesson like this. Damn it, why would someone kick someone's door in the morning? Why would he lift the owner up as soon as he entered? What was this? This was a slap in the face. How would Lao Tzu survive on this street from now on? Did he not care about his reputation? After the three of them took turns to open the floodgates to let the water out, Yu Qigong saw that Zhang Feng was still ignoring them and could not help but panic. After all, not to mention the magical military book, the magical porridge was the best way to solve the military's food shortage. He had eaten that thing before, and it was indeed very magical. Not only did it have the fragrance of meat, but his old legs did not flare up while he was eating the porridge. What was this? This was a treasure. Furthermore, he had heard that Zhang Feng had even brought the divine Dr. Sun Simiao to Pyrolite Mountain to perfect the kanji. Yu Qigong couldn't help but have some thoughts. But even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't dare associate that person with the kid in front of him. She didn't look like one at all. However, at this moment, Cheng Yaojin ignored him and Qin Shubao sat there with a respectful expression without saying a word. This made Yu Qigong's hair stand on end. Yu Qigong was a man made of steel and had seen all sorts of situations. Since he would be cut down no matter what he did, Yu Qigong stood up and cupped his fists with a smile. "Little brother, I apologize for offending you just now. I really needed to go to the toilet." If the patrolling soldiers found me peeing on the street, they would confiscate my tools. That's why I acted this way after I found out that Big Old Black and your shopkeeper are brothers. If I've offended you in any way, please forgive me. I will take full responsibility for this matter. And to offend you, I have a piece of ancient jade here that I'm willing to give to you. I'll send someone to give you 1,000 strings of cash as an apology. How about that? But I haven't asked who your master is. Whose disciple are you? He couldn't figure out the kid's identity, so he had no choice. When Zhang Feng heard that, he didn't want to fall out with old Chen, so he turned around and cupped his fists. He pointed at the door and said, "It's nothing but my neck and butt are hurting right now." When Yu Qigong heard that, how could he not know that the kid was taking advantage of the situation to extort him? He had no choice but to grit his teeth and say, "Old man originally suffered from old cold legs. An old friend of mine obtained a batch from Goguryeo." "Hey, what are you talking about? Although 100-year-old ginseng is very precious, you don't need a whole cart. But since you're old Chen's friend, I won't stand on ceremony. How much is this door worth? I'll exchange it myself. Come, come, come. Have a seat." Yu Qigong wanted to slap himself. Why didn't you say so earlier? Why didn't you say so earlier? Great, now it was a whole cart. No matter how rich his family was, a cart of 100-year-old ginseng would cost at least 10,000 strings of cash. But what could he do now? Moreover, the kid couldn't figure out his identity and was even wearing the clothes of a great scholar, yet old He didn't find it strange. He couldn't figure out Zhang Feng's identity, so he could only force a smile and cupped his fists. "I haven't asked for your name yet, young man." Zhang Feng waved his hand and took out 3 jugs of 65-proof white wine from the wine cabinet. He then took out a jug of 15-proof sake and handed it to the 3 of them. Finally, he placed the 15-proof sake in front of him and cupped his fists. "I apologize for my lack of care. I'm Zhang Feng, and I'll be the shopkeeper of this tavern." Yu Qigong was dumbfounded. Qin Shubao was dumbfounded. So, this kid was Zhang Feng? Was he also the shopkeeper of this tavern? Or was he a great scholar? Qin Shubao seemed to have thought of something. He stood up and cupped his fists. "I've heard a lot about Prince Zhang. Chang'an University is not only well known in Chang'an City, but also in the remote areas of Jiannan Province. It's a blessing of 3 lifetimes to be able to meet me today." Chapter 653. Yu Qigong went crazy. He finally connected all the dots in Qin Shubao's words. He had heard of the Chang'an Academy. After all, his 2 sons had been kidnapped by the Crown Prince. How could he not know? However, they only knew that it was opened by a young man named Zhang Feng, who was only 20 years old. With just 3 poems, he was jointly recommended by Yu Shernan, Chu Suiliang, and the other 3 great scholars to be a great scholar. But why didn't he associate it with this boy? Now that he had offended Zhang Feng, he suddenly felt that his 2 silly sons were going to be in trouble. Yu Qigong hurriedly cupped his fists and looked Zhang Feng up and down. He clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "So you're the famous Zhang Feng? No discord, no concord. I was reckless today. Don't worry, in 3 days, a cart of Korean ginseng will be sent here. Take it as my apology. I've heard that Xingshan Academy is marvelous, but as you can see, I don't even know how to read a basket of words, but I've got a book called Han Fizi. Please kindly accept it." Zhang Feng's expression changed. Han Fizi. Since it was Han Fizi. And it was a rare book. In the future, Han Fizi could only be summarized from rumors and words of various dynasties. The real Han Fizi had long disappeared in the long river of history. Although he didn't know if this Han Fizi was Han Fizi's original work, it would be a good sign in the academy. What did the ancient academies compete with? They competed with the talents in high school and the number of books they collected. And what did they compete with in the collection of books? It was these rare books, the only books. This was especially true for rare and one-of-a-kind ancient books from before the Qin dynasty. After all, that was an era that people yearned for, and everything now basically evolved from those works. For example, Sun Tzu's Art of War and so on. Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Thank you for your gift, old you. I'll remember this favor. If you need me in the future, just let me know." Yu Qigong couldn't help but be overjoyed when he heard this. Indeed, it proved the old saying that one could not catch the wolf without risking the child. Although he didn't understand Han Fizi, he wasn't stupid. He had already found someone to copy at least 10 copies. As for giving the only copy to Zhang Feng, on the one hand, it was for his son's sake. On the other hand, it was because of him. That was a book on the art of war. Zhang Feng was about to propose a toast, but when he saw the empty table and Cheng Yaojin in the tavern, he slapped his head and said, "I'm sorry for my rudeness. Please take a seat. I'll go and prepare the dishes." As he spoke, Zhang Feng hurriedly took off his robe and went into the kitchen. Wearing this thing was really a hindrance. He really didn't know why the people of this era cared so much about this robe. Within a quarter of an hour, his body staggered, and he almost fell to the ground. Yu Qigong was also surprised. "Fengzi, what's wrong with you? Did you collapse from exhaustion last night? Why is the body of someone who can come up with such amazing military knowledge so weak?" Chapter 654. Zhang Feng had already passed out at this time. Since he returned to Chang'an this time, he had been drunk every day. Zhang Feng wondered if he should not have come back. If it went on like this, his stomach would be perforated sooner or later. He coughed violently for a while. Zhang Feng hurriedly refused Yu Qigong's kindness and waved his hand repeatedly. "Brother, you're good at drinking. You guys continue. I've suffered on the mountain. I can't eat enough and sleep well every day. No matter how good my body is, it will be worn out. I'm not as good as you guys. Don't try to fool us. Last time my Tainyo came back, he said that you lived a good life on the mountain. Not only did you eat wine and meat every day, but you also cook some roast chicken every day. You're not a good friend." Zhang Feng stared at Cheng Yaojin and his face darkened. But when he took a closer look, he found that Cheng Yaojin was completely fine after drinking a jar of wine. He was very different from before. He couldn't help but realize that the wine was exchanged by this grandson. And among the people at the table, only Cheng Yaojin knew that he had done this. But he had no evidence, so he could do nothing. Just like that, the dizzy Zhang Feng was forced to drink almost half a liter of wine by the three people. Seeing that Zhang Feng was talking too much, they couldn't help but stop. Instead, they asked Zhang Feng to eat. More than 2 hours later, Zhang Feng finally regained a little clarity. It couldn't be helped. Zhang Feng originally didn't have a high alcohol tolerance, but after drinking with these amazing people all day long, his alcohol tolerance slowly increased. Although it wasn't a huge amount, at least a liter of alcohol was nothing to him. However, today's situation was a bit abnormal. Even a fool could see it, let alone someone like Cheng Yaojin who couldn't hide things. He had something to ask of him. Otherwise, why would this person give him a cart of Korean ginseng at the beginning? That would be a real fool. And not only that, he also gave him Han Fizi. What was Han Fizi? This was a genuine treasure, but this guy actually gave it to him so easily? If he wasn't an idiot, then he was an idiot. However, even though he looked like an idiot, he was able to work under Lao Li and make Lao Li hand over the entire Long Yu business to him. What did that mean? Moreover, Zhang Feng always felt that old Qin, who looked gentle and quiet, was not someone to be trifled with. After all, there was a saying, "A full pot doesn't make a sound, but half of it is shaking." Zhang Feng deliberately pretended to be drunk. Although this appearance was a little too much, it never failed. Zhang Feng's reputation as a good drinker had long been known. This was a natural signboard. This time, he successfully prevented Zhang Feng from being drunk. "I understand your intentions now. My great Tang truly lacks examples of patriotic soldiers like you. Since the two of you have spoken, this humble one might not have any other items, but I do have the recipe for a porridge that can resist hunger and strengthen the body. I hope that the two of you can pass it to General Cheng Yaojin." Yu Qigong and the other two couldn't help but look at each other. Damn, so this kid is a softie. Chapter 655. Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong, who had discovered Zhang Feng's weakness, looked at each other and gave him a thumbs up. "You're so righteous, young friend. I've eaten your porridge in Chang'an City before. My legs don't hurt anymore after eating it. It's amazing. Old man, I didn't expect you to give me such a precious thing. It's a blessing for the Tang dynasty. He knew it very well. Once he obtained the formula for this thing, what kind of terrifying profits would he reap? Take the Chong and local treasury for example. He had been there for a few days. Although the emperor only sold each bowl of porridge for 1 copper coin, he had made at least 10,000 strings of cash. How amazing was that? Once this thing appeared in the army, not only would it solve the problem of the soldiers' stomachs, it would also make the soldiers stronger and more energetic. Not to mention, if this thing was placed in Long Yu Road and opened a kanji shop, it would also increase the army's income by a lot. After all, the soldiers would have starved to death if they relied on their salaries. Every day's training required a huge amount of food. Not only that, but herbs, doctors, equipment maintenance, and so on also required money. Now that this thing was added to the army, the big problem would be solved. Qin Qiong was also excited. He got up and slapped him. Zhang Feng hurriedly got up and helped them up. Brothers, are you looking down on me? No matter how amazing this thing is, it's just a piece of paper to me. If you need it, and it's for the sake of the country and the people, I wouldn't dare to keep it for myself. Then wouldn't the reputation of my White Deer Academy be destroyed if the world were to find out about it? After that, Zhang Feng pretended to be surprised and said, "Don't mention this again. If anyone says anything, they're not my brothers anymore." Ha ha ha. Good. That's a real man. A real man. Good. Come, let's drink. Let's drink for this, Jing Fengzi. Yu Qigong took the lead. The three of them each picked a jar of wine from the wine cabinet and gulped it down. Zhang Feng's eyelids twitched. They were all drinking low-alcohol wine. F***CK. Now, Zhang Feng finally understood. They had all changed their wine to low-alcohol ones? Zhang Feng wanted to cry. He felt like he had been fooled. In his heart, he swore that in the future, he would replace all the packaging of this wine with glass bottles. Then, he would let all of you have your pick. When the three saw that Zhang Feng was not moving his mouth, Yu Qigong glared at Zhang Feng and said, "What? Are you looking down on the three of us?" Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. "You flatter me. I can't hold my liquor. If I drink any more, I'll really fall over. If it were me, I would drink such a generous thing even if I were to be forced to death." "Don't say any more. Drink. Even if you drink a bowl, it's fine too." Zhang Feng was speechless. He could only pretend to be drunk, pouring half a bowl, drinking half of it, and pouring the other half down his neck into his collar. Yu Qigong and the other two pretended not to see anything, and continued to drink by themselves. This kid was not honest. He had to drink too much. Otherwise, it would be bad if this kid pulled some dirty tricks. After half a bowl of wine went down his stomach, Zhang Feng only felt that the world was spinning. At that moment, Yu Qigong Kai once again put on a sorrowful expression and said, "Brother, to tell you the truth, we came here for another reason." Was he finally going to say his purpose? Zhang Feng pretended not to know anything. He grabbed Yu Qigong's shoulder dizzily but failed. He grabbed Yu Qigong's beard and asked, "Brother, tell me. As long as I can do it, everything is negotiable." Yu Qigong grimaced in pain. Finally, he managed to pry Zhang Feng's hand away and said, "Actually, we want to train a group of people in our industry. Do you understand what I mean?" "Thugs?" Zhang Feng asked. Yu Qigong coughed and said, "Well, something like that. But we don't have any good ideas. After all, the things in the military camp are forbidden to be taught to outsiders. So we were wondering if we could ask you for help. After all, according to Lao Li and the others, you are almost like a god. You can even make something as magical as porridge, so this should be a piece of cake for you." Zhang Feng knew that this guy was up to no good. Now, it turned out that he was thinking about his military studies. Forget it. Isn't it just the same as the military training? Lao Tzu would give it to him. For the sake of the car full of ginseng and the movie Han Fizi, she decided to do it. Zhang Feng pretended to be hesitant for a long time and said, "In fact, this thing is the treasure of my academy. But since you are my brothers, I can't keep it to myself. But I have my difficulties too." Chang Yaojin didn't say anything. It didn't mean that he didn't know anything. On the contrary, he knew Zhang Feng very well. This time, there were more twists and turns than anything else. The moment Zhang Feng said this sentence, Zhang Feng's eyes lit up. Chang Yaojin knew that Yu Qigong was going to be in trouble. Chapter 656. Of course, Yu Qigong and Qin Shubao didn't know what Zhang Feng was up to. They only thought that something had happened on the mountain. After all, it was a barren mountain. It had only been a month, so it was natural that there would be problems. Not to mention, this kid was so eager for quick success. Yu Qigong stroked his beard. Zhang Feng couldn't help but shudder when he saw the fleas on his beard. He swore in his heart that after these 3 left, he would definitely take a good medicinal bath. These fleas, this person was really something. There were so many fleas, but he was still alive and well? He hadn't been squeezed dry? Yu Qigong naturally didn't know what Zhang Feng was thinking. He stroked his beard and said, "Feng Zi, is there someone on the mountain causing trouble? If that's the case, I only need my 2 sons to go to your academy. If anyone dares to cause trouble, they'll all be thrown off the mountain. How about that?" Damn it, what kind of people were they? Beating people up for no reason? Zhang Feng hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No one is causing trouble in the academy. But you know, to build an academy, money is needed everywhere. Old Chen and the others know my situation best. If it weren't for Lao Li's little help, the academy might have gone on strike." "I understand. You're short of money." Chang Yaojin's eyelids twitched. He glanced at Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong, then looked at Zhang Feng, who was pretending to be poor. The corner of his mouth twitched. "You're short of money?" He knew that he didn't pay a single cent for the construction of the academy. Instead, he made a lot of money. The emperor paid for the land, which was equivalent to giving it away for free. Previously, the emperor paid for the land, but in the end, he returned a lot of money. Didn't this money end up in his pocket? Moreover, the crown prince was basically supporting the construction of the academy. "You paid for it?" But Chang Yaojin didn't dare to say that. He also wanted to see how Yu Qigong and Qin Qiong would feel after knowing that they had been defeated. As expected, Qin Qiong cupped his fists and said with an expression of being stunned by Zhang Feng's words, "Little friend Zhang Feng is truly noble and a role model for my generation. It really makes me feel ashamed. If you lack food, then I really can't take it out. But if you're talking about silver, as long as you need it, it just so happens that the copper coins in my storehouse are about to go moldy. I'll find someone to send it to you on another day. Immediately." Zhang Feng's eyelids twitched. "Is the money in the treasury moldy? How much would that cost?" He hurriedly cupped his hands and sighed with emotion. "Elder brother Qin is still the best. Then, I'll thank you here." Wait. How could Yu Qigong sit still? However, before he spoke, he looked at Chang Yaojin. That meant, how would Chang Yaojin know that he would be caught in the crossfire if he just sat there and didn't speak? He could only say, "Lao Tzu isn't like the rest of you. I estimate that 500 dan of food and fodder have already been transported to Shao Mountain." When Zhang Feng heard this, he grabbed Chang Yaojin's hand excitedly. "Elder brother Chen, you're really the savior of my college. I represent White Deer College to thank you for the food. When my college is completed, there will definitely be a place for you on the Merit Monument." When Chang Yaojin heard this, he stroked his beard and laughed loudly as he stared at Yu Qigong. "You're still the best. Good, good, good. When the food from the south arrives, I'll think of a way to get some for you." Yu Qigong was infuriated. He clenched his teeth and slammed the table. "I don't have any food, but I heard that Feng Zi is looking for skilled craftsmen. I happen to have such talents under me. If you need them, I'll get them for you tomorrow. Is 5,000 enough?" Zhang Feng was stunned. 5,000 people? Do you think I'm a charity hall here? Raise 5,000 people for you? Although he didn't know what these people under old Yu did, these 5,000 mouths needed to eat. After calculating, Zhang Feng still gritted his teeth and said, "Although," seeing Zhang Feng's ugly expression, Yu Qigong gritted his teeth again and said, "Along with them up the mountain were old man's 10,000 coins and some silk brocade." When he heard this, Zhang Feng immediately squeezed out a smile. "Oh my, elder brother, you're still the most practical. All right. Just based on your words, even if you want me to sacrifice my life, I won't hesitate." Yu Qigong felt the pinch. Moreover, The 5,000 people under him were all skilled in construction. When there was a war, it was fine because they were all treasures. Whether it was blacksmiths or carpenters, they were all experts. There were even top craftsmen. However, when there was no war, they had to spend a lot of money and food to raise them. Normally, it wasn't much. Every mouthful of food was a matter of money. However, there was no other way now. Yu Qigong was already eating porridge every day. Where would he have the money to raise people? However, after being provoked by Chang Yaojin, he instantly thought of this idea. It just so happened that Zhang Feng was short on manpower and he couldn't afford to raise them. Didn't they happily reach an agreement? After they drank another bowl of wine, Zhang Feng asked, "Oh right, may I know why you brothers are here this time?" Chapter 657. Zhang Feng had really forgotten. Yu Qigong was a little speechless. He nudged Qin Qiong with his elbow, and Qin Qiong said, "Brother, you know that we're in Long Yu, and the border isn't peaceful right now, so we want to train a group of guards to guard against thieves." "They're the thugs you mentioned." Zhang Feng suddenly understood. If that's the case with such a big business, the local area. "Fengzi, you really don't remember?" Yu Qigong suspected that this kid was pretending to be drunk. He had clearly said it just now, and now he was asking again. Wasn't it obvious that he wanted to scam them again? He was afraid. Now, other than the mansion in Chong'an and those businesses, he had given everything he could to this kid. He was afraid. If it happened again, he could only use the mansion to repay the debt. Chang Yaojin also felt that it was a little too much. He hurriedly explained what he had just said. Zhang Feng still gave him face. Only then did he come to a realization. He pretended to be angry and said, "You should have said so earlier." "Why didn't you say so earlier? Why didn't you say something so important earlier? That place not only has your businesses, but I also have shares in all of your businesses. If those thieves rob it, won't that cut off my path to wealth?" Yu Qigong and the other two were completely speechless. They only had one thought at this time. They wanted to beat someone up. This grandson was too *king annoying. So after talking for so long, they were now the ones to be blamed? Zhang Feng didn't want to be long-winded anymore. Now that his head was dizzy, he just wanted to quickly deal with this matter and go to sleep. Otherwise, when he was dizzy, he would be tricked by these three. That would be terrible. Well, as I've said before, this is the treasure of my academy. It's also a secret that I won't pass on. However, since you've all been so generous, it would be inhumane of me to hide it from you. However, I have a test question here. If you can answer it correctly, then this military book will be presented to you with both hands. No, and that training method of yours. I want that too. Qin Qiong hurriedly added. Zhang Feng patted his head and said, "Then I'll have to trouble Brother Qin to help me get the brush and ink. I'm drunk. This training method is actually very simple. You just need to build a training ground according to what I've drawn. Horizontal bars, parallel bars, this swamp altar, sandbags, and this. How was Zhang Feng drunk at this moment? While writing and drawing on the paper, he explained to them, such as the fishnet-like net wall, the wooden horse, the minefield that required them to crawl, and so on. The more they looked and listened, the more their eyes burned with passion. What is this? In the past, their barracks, regardless of whether it was good or bad, were all thrown into the training ground and trained to kill. But who would have noticed that soldiers could train like this? Let's not talk about the soldiers first. Let's talk about the weightlifting squats first. While Zhang Feng was talking, Chang Yaojin quietly ran to the backyard and found a sack of food. He held it high above his head, but after only 10 rounds, he felt like he was running from the palace to Chong'an City and then running back. It was as strenuous as running from the palace to the outskirts of Chong'an City and then running back. His legs were as sore as if he had climbed a mountain for a whole day. Chang Yaojin couldn't help but be shocked. He pulled the three of them to the backyard and pointed at the sack. "Fengzi, let's not talk about other things first. Lao Tzu's physical strength is not bad. He can lift 180 kilograms without panting or blushing. But why can't I do 3 of the squats you talked about with this sack of food?" Zhang Feng heard this and glared. "Do you still need to ask? Tell me, how old are you? You haven't even flexed your muscles yet, and you're suddenly undergoing such high-intensity training. You should thank the heavens that you didn't tear your ligaments. Faced with Zhang Feng's attack, Cheng Yaojin didn't care. In any case, this brat dared to insult others. He even dared to insult the emperor, so he didn't care. But this thing was very important, so he didn't dare to be careless. After all, this thing was really damn useful. In the long run, if he squatted 5 times a day, he would only need to do 5 times. In a month, his broad axe would be able to add another 50 kilograms. Moreover, it would be as easy as playing with a small wooden stick. If he let his subordinates do such a miraculous thing, then everyone would be able to watch a broad axe charge forward. That would be damn exciting. Zhang Feng slowly pointed to a green brick at the corner of the wall and said, "At the very beginning, you guys can rely on your good physical strength, so you can definitely do it. However, those servants of yours who drink porridge all day definitely can't do it like you guys. This will only cause them to die without a doubt. Don't you guys understand the principle of more haste, less speed?" Yu Qigong and the other two shook their heads, causing Zhang Feng's face to darken. "Hey, this needs to be done step by step. For example, at the beginning, you guys can tie this brick to your ankles and then jump on the spot like this." As he spoke, Zhang Feng jumped on the spot to demonstrate for the 3 people to see. However, he didn't tie the brick to his ankles. Then, he continued, after 10 days, you can add half a brick to each leg and jump on the spot. You only need to do it 3 times a day, each time for half a quarter of an hour. After that, you can also run with weights. Chapter 658. At this time, you will need this toy. Old Chen, do you believe that if you do as I say, a month later, even if you squat for 2 hours with this toy in your hand, your face won't turn red and you won't be out of breath? At that time, even if there are only 100 of you, you will be able to defeat 10,000 Tufan soldiers. Hiss. The 3 of them were shocked when they heard this. If not for the fact that Cheng Yaojin had held up the bag of grain just now, the 3 of them would definitely have thought that this kid was bragging. However, after hearing Zhang Feng's detailed explanation, the 3 of them could not help but gasp. As long as they were not fools, they would be able to figure it out. However, Yu Qigong could not figure it out. "Fengzi, what does this have to do with the battlefield? Don't we need to charge and kill on the battlefield? Why do you only pay attention to this? Don't you need the conventional charging and killing formation?" Zhang Feng looked at Yu Qigong as if he was looking at a fool and said, "Who said that? Do you think that what I drew on the notebook for you was just for fun? Let me tell you, this is actually the elementary military science, also known as military training. If a person can completely master this thing, then he will be qualified to train in individual combat and formation. If that's the case," Zhang Feng thought for a while and said, "you only need to go to the military camp and hire a trainer. Now, you can hire a trainer with just 1 stone of grain. Don't they know those things? At this time, you can ask them to teach you. After 3 years, when Chen Tiniu and the others come out, I will ask them to train you. In less than a month, all of your fighters will be able to become commandants." The 3 of them were completely envious when they heard this. It turned out that there was still the most important part that he had not taught them. No way. They had to get their sons to come to the academy. Otherwise, in 3 years, that big fool Cheng Yaojin would be so arrogant. Yu Qigong could not help but ask, "Fengzi, there is one more thing that we are here for this time. Look, I am an uncouth man, but the 2 boys at home are too handsome. They are always causing trouble in Chang'an City. That's why I was wondering if I should send them to you. Come on. I'd like to see how handsome you're talking about." Zhang Feng patted his chest and said, "We are all brothers. Since we are brothers, let's not talk about these things. As long as they come, I guarantee that in 3 years, I will teach them all my skills." "That's a promise. Old Qin, I also have a—" Come. Zhang Feng directly interrupted Qin Qiong and patted his chest. After that, Zhang Feng personally demonstrated the benefits of combining military training with physical training and organized everything into a written document. Only then did the 3 of them hold it in their arms like it was a treasure. However, in the end, none of them felt at ease. Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin glared at Qin Qiong. How could Qin Qiong not know? He borrowed the pen and ink in Zhang Feng's hand and hurriedly copied 2 copies. Only then did Yu Qigong and the other 2 give up. Zhang Feng also took the opportunity to quickly make a bowl of vinegar soup and drank it. With a shiver, he also sobered up a lot. At this time, when he saw the 3 of them holding the sack up and down, Zhang Feng was speechless. However, it was not good to say anything. Anyway, if they wanted to play with this thing, then let them play with it. The preparation itself was a set of fitness equipment in the future. However, in this era there was no other way to use it. They could only use the simplest. If it was possible, Zhang Feng would definitely copy the original set of military training in the future. However, it was not now. Even if he wanted to do it, he would do it in the academy. After the 3 of them played with it for a while, seeing that Zhang Feng seemed to have sobered up, Qin Qiong breathed heavily and stretched his body. Fengzi, this thing is really so magical. Usually, even if you walk for a whole day or ride for a whole day, your face won't be red and you won't be out of breath. However, this sack is at least 100 pounds. Why is it that after a few plays, my whole body feels uncomfortable as if it has been hammered? You guys are too weak. The few of them were speechless. However, according to Zhang Feng's standards, they were really too weak. However, at this time, they were even more passionate about the military training that Zhang Feng was talking about. Cheng Yaojin could not sit still anymore. He wanted to slap Zhang Feng, but was nimbly dodged by the annoying guy. He touched his nose and said, Fengzi, just tell us, what is this military training thing? Today, after hearing what you said, I feel uncomfortable, as if a cat is scratching my heart. Okay, if you guys want to know, I will ask you the simplest thing. If you guys tell me, not only will I teach you all about military training, but I will also teach you the second half of the training manual that is considered confidential. How about it? The 3 of them heard this and hurried over. Is what you said true? Zhang Feng patted his chest and looked at the 3 of them with disdain. How can it be false? Okay, then ask. Now, each of you has 3,000 people, and I have 5,000 pounds of grain. How can you distribute the 50,000 pounds of grain equally? Chapter 659. This time, the 3 of them were stunned. That was something that belonged to the quartermaster. How would they know? However, when they thought of Zhang Feng's amazing military knowledge, they could not help but scratch their heads and think hard. After a while, Qin Qiong asked tentatively, Fengzi, you said that we each have 3,000 people, and you have 5,000 dan of grain. If it were me, I would combine these 9,000 people into one, and then according to the number of people, give everyone 1 gene of grain and slowly distribute it. Is that okay? Zhang Feng pursed his lips. That's too slow. Moreover, I'm talking about 3 groups. For example, Wei, Shu, and Wu of the 3 kingdoms. Do you think you can integrate the 3 of them? When Qin Qiong heard this, he could not help but frown. After thinking for a while, he shook his head. Look, Fengzi, I've thought of something. 5,000 dan of grain is enough. If I were the quartermaster, I would give the grain to each force 1,000 dan. Zhang Feng nodded and motioned for Yu Qigong to continue. However, Yu Qigong was stuck again. He could not divide the remaining 2,000 dan. No matter how he divided it, there would be 1 less person's share. There was no way to divide it. Cheng Yaojin slapped Yu Qigong on the head and said excitedly, I understand. Fengzi, if it's the 3 kingdoms, the Wei army will definitely be the strongest. 3,000 dan, and the remaining 2,000 dan will be divided equally between Shu and Wu? Wrong. They were all wrong. Zhang Feng looked at the 3 of them with a sinister smile. In the end, he smiled helplessly and said, Think about it carefully. When the time comes, come to me when you've thought it through. However, I'm warning you, if I find out that you've found someone else to do this, I won't give you the military book. Zhang Feng's words extinguished the excitement in their eyes. The 3 of them had originally planned to solve this problem as soon as they left this place. This damned little bastard was truly a thief. He had directly blocked off their escape route. The 3 of them could only dejectedly leave. As they walked, they pondered about this matter. From time to time, they would quarrel on the street and even fight. Zhang Feng did not care about all of this. Because at this moment, an important person had arrived. Jingshu. Jingshu had actually arrived a long time ago. However, she didn't enter the room. Instead, she stood quietly by the door and waited. However, the fragrance that wafted out of her body from time to time had long since alerted the four of them. Only then did Yu Qigong and the other two hurriedly leave. How could these people not know that a long separation is better than a new love? Zhang Feng looked at Jing Shu, who quietly took off her guzheng and put it on the table. Then she sat opposite him and took off her veil. He said, "Miss Jing Shu, long time no see. You've lost weight. Drink less." Zhang Feng choked instantly. He could only laugh foolishly and say, "You saw it too. There's nothing I can do. These guys wanted to get me drunk the moment they came. I can't beat them." Jing Shu chuckled and said, "How was it on the mountain? I heard from the people at Chang'an University that you went to look for a carpenter?" Zhang Feng nodded. When Jing Shu got the confirmation, her originally cold face couldn't help but become more melancholy at this time. Seeing this, Zhang Feng hurriedly explained, "Well, I didn't mean anything else. I looked for a carpenter for something else. Isn't this pork too musty? I just wanted to solve this problem for him. After all, the Tang dynasty is short of food now." "Prince Zhang, you don't need to explain," Jing Shu said lightly. "This little girl knows that Prince Zhang is very busy. But when I learned that you have returned to Chang'an, I wanted to come and see you. Since we've met, this little girl will take her leave." Zhang Feng was stunned. He could feel that Jing Shu had a lot to say and the worry in her eyes. However, he also understood that now was not the time to talk about this. After all, he had neither fame nor career. As a good young man in the 21st century, how could he dare to marry a beauty before he made a career? The most important thing was, this damn polygamy in the Tang dynasty made him somewhat unable to care about it. Although at the beginning, Zhang Feng had wanted to have a woman on both sides. Which man didn't want to? But when he really saw Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao, he panicked. His usual wisdom seemed to be stuck. What's more, now he knew that the two women were like sisters, which made Zhang Feng even more difficult to deal with. Looking at Jing Shu's back, he could only sigh. Alas! I can only take one step at a time. At this time, hearing this sigh, Old He's daughter, Xiao Xiao, who was standing at the door, made a face at Zhang Feng, then raised her small fist and followed Jing Shu away. Did it need to be said? Zhang Feng was not a fool. Zhang Feng was a little scared. But in the end, he quickly wrote 2 poems and put them in 2 envelopes. Then he hurried to catch up with Jing Shu and said, "I've been too busy these days. On the mountain. I know what happened on the mountain." Zhang Feng interrupted Jing Shu and solemnly handed the 2 letters in his hand to Jing Shu and said, "Miss Jing Shu, please pass on Yu Yao's letter on my behalf. Every night when I dream at midnight, I will look at the lights in Chang'an City and hear the sound of insects in my ears. It's like the sound of your zither." Jing Shu's face turned red because of Zhang Feng's sudden words of love, especially on the street. Fortunately, her veil was covered at this time, but Jing Shu still hurried away. Only then did Xiao Xiao give Zhang Feng a thumbs up and skipped away. Chapter 660. Ever since she entered Chang'an University, Jing Shu was particularly focused on the rumors about Zhang Feng. Jing Shu wouldn't let go of even the slightest rumor about Zhang Feng. In the beginning, Jing Shu believed that Zhang Feng had really fulfilled her promise and deciphered the Hygge 18 beats. She didn't have much contact with Zhang Feng, but she knew most of the people around Zhang Feng. Therefore, this aroused Jing Shu's curiosity. Moreover, Zhang Feng was handsome and didn't have a wife. Where could she find such a Mr. Right? In addition, Zhang Feng's talent was enough to leave those debauches in the dust. Zhang Feng was the Mr. Right that Jing Shu had never dreamed of. After all, being born in Yanlai Lu was a blemish. However, although Zhang Feng was a little evasive, he didn't refuse. This obviously meant that he acquiesced. In addition, the outside world had already spread the news about the relationship between the two. On one hand, it was because she wanted to marry Zhang Feng. On the other hand, it was because of Zhang Feng's talent. During this period, since Zhang Feng went up Shao Mountain, the legend of Zhang Feng resounded throughout Chang'an City. It was even said that the miracle-working Dr. Sun Simiao was attracted by Zhang Feng to go up Shao Mountain and hadn't come down until now. A few days ago, there was a rumor that the contemporary great scholar Yu Shernan, after going up Shao Mountain, directly declared that he would close himself and go up Shao Mountain. This made Jing Shu even more attracted to Zhang Feng, as if she had lost her soul. Every day, she would fall into longing for him. If she hadn't met Zhang Yuyao when the imperial edict was read last time, she probably wouldn't have been able to bear the pain of longing and went up Shao Mountain. However, it was also because she met Zhang Yuyao, two people with poor lives, that she had a trace of comfort. Zhang Yuyao didn't dislike Jing Shu's birth and even learned ancient music from Jing Shu. The two even became sisters. For Jing Shu, such a wonderful thing was a blessing from the heavens. Although she was a singer of Yen Lai Lu and a frequent guest of the imperial family, she also had another identity. She was the disciple of Empress Zhang's son. Empress Zhang's son had once wanted her to marry the crown prince. Fortunately, Zhang Feng had appeared at this time. Jing Shu was very resistant to becoming the crown prince's concubine. Before she entered Yen Lai Lu, she was the daughter of a minister of the previous dynasty and naturally knew the depths of the imperial palace. For her, the imperial palace was just a nightmare. Fortunately, in the end, the emperor stepped in and tacitly agreed to her relationship with Zhang Feng. He even had the intention to matchmake them. What was this? This was a true blessing from the heavens. Little wife, we're here. While Jing Shu was lost in her thoughts, a small voice sounded beside her. At this time, Jing Shu raised her head and discovered that they had already arrived at Zhang Manor. At this time, the sedan bearer had already come to report. The servants at the door were already used to Jing Shu's arrival and hurriedly opened the door. Jing Shu leisurely entered Zhang Manor under an oil paper umbrella. As soon as she entered, Zhang Shan had already received the news and personally waited at the door with Yu Yao. This morning, Old Man heard the noise of a magpie at the door. So it was Jing Shu who came to visit. Jing Shu bowed to Zhang Shan and Madame Zhang, then said, "Uncle Zhang is joking. This little girl doesn't dare to take responsibility. However, this little girl has indeed brought a piece of good news today. Is it that brat Zhang Feng's?" As they spoke, they entered the drawing room. Jing Shu also secretly handed a letter to Zhang Yuyao. When Zhang Yuyao saw the handwriting on the letter, her face instantly flushed red. She could recognize Zhang Feng's handwriting. After all, only Zhang Feng could write such ugly handwriting. The moment they entered the drawing room, Zhang Shan noticed that something was wrong with Zhang Yuyao, but he didn't say anything. He only asked a simple question about Zhang Feng inviting a craftsman up the mountain before leaving with a hearty laugh. Only the two women were left behind. It was only then that Zhang Yuyao pulled Jing Shu into the boudoir. "Little sister Jing Shu, quickly tell me how Prince Zhang is doing. He's lost weight and has experienced the vicissitudes of life. However, this is all from drinking wine." Jing Shu was still concise and comprehensive. As she spoke, she also took out the letter that Zhang Feng wrote to her and placed it on Zhang Yuyao's dressing table. At this time, the two women carefully opened the envelope and opened the yellow straw paper. There was nothing else on the paper, only a short poem. Zhang Yuyao softly read the poem that Zhang Feng wrote to her. "When the lotus leaves are born, they are born with regret. When the lotus leaves wither, they are born with regret. When the lotus leaves wither, they are born with regret. When the lotus leaves wither, they are born with regret." When Zhang Yuyao finished reading, she was already looking at Jing Shu with tears in her eyes. Jing Shu also recited slowly, "Meeting is difficult, parting is also difficult. The east wind is weak, 100 flowers wither, the spring silkworm silk ends only when it dies, the candle torch turns to ashes, tears begin to dry, the morning mirror but the clouds change, the night song should feel the cold moonlight, there is no road to Mount Peng this time, the green bird is eager to explore." The two women were both talented women. Naturally, they could also see Zhang Feng's feelings from Zhang Feng's poem. However, they were also deeply shocked by the yearning in Zhang Feng's poem. Chapter 661. The news of Yu Qigong and the others coming to Zhang Feng's place had already reached Li Shimon's ears when the two girls returned to the palace. Li Shimon didn't find it strange that the two of them were going to Zhang Feng's place. Thinking about it, he understood that if the three of them didn't even know who went up Shao Mountain, then his career as a great general was over. The three of them also knew that they couldn't hide the fact that they came to Zhang Feng's tavern. Moreover, this matter was too big for them to hide. Moreover, they really didn't know how to deal with Zhang Feng's rotten idea. They could only helplessly ask the emperor. After all, even if they knew the answer, they had to pretend that they didn't. Because if the emperor said it was right, then it was right. Otherwise, it would be the end of their lives. As soon as the three of them entered Taiji Palace, they knew that the emperor had been waiting for them. As soon as they entered the imperial study, the three of them bowed in unison. Old General Cheng Yaojin, Yu Qigong, and Qin Qiong greet the emperor. Li Shimin put down the brush in his hand and picked up a piece of calligraphy to admire. Then, he compared it with Zhang Feng's crooked poem on the wall. The smile on his face instantly disappeared by more than half. He put down the piece of calligraphy gloomily and asked, "I heard that you went to Zhang Feng's place today?" Reporting to the emperor, "We did go to Zhang Feng's place." Li Shimin smiled. After indicating for the three of them to sit down, he asked, "Tell me, what is this brat bragging about again?" Yu Qigong and the others heard this, but Cheng Yaojin didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at Yu Qigong. Yu Qigong then looked at Qin Qiong, this grandson, who was playing with his fingers and shaking his head. He could only say in a muffled voice, "The day before yesterday, I heard from Elder Fong that he went to Shao Mountain with old Mr. Yu Shernan. Isn't this old general always heard of Brother Zhang Feng's reputation, but didn't see him? That's why I wanted to visit him. To be able to meet him today, this Prince Zhang is truly a rare talent." Li Shimin smiled when he heard that. "What did he say?" "Replying to your majesty, this is the military training book that little brother Zhang Feng gave to us. Please take a look, your majesty." Qin Qiong did not dare to hide it. He hurriedly handed the original copy that Zhang Feng wrote to Li Shimin. Little Gizi hurriedly took it and handed it to Li Shimin. Li Shimin flipped through the book, and his gaze finally settled on the picture. He waved his hand, and little Gizi hurriedly took out an exquisite red sandalwood box from the bookshelf. He took out an identical piece of paper and unfolded it in front of Li Shimin. Li Shimin compared the two pictures, then laughed and said, "This kid really is. Come, take a look. What's the difference between these two blueprints?" Hearing this, the three of them couldn't help but be surprised. Did the emperor also go to the tavern? And he even obtained this? The three of them hurriedly stepped forward. They almost gouged out their eyeballs and threw them on the blueprints to compare. They could not help but sigh inwardly when they took a look. "Oh my God, this grandson of mine is really dishonest." He had given all the blueprints to the emperor, so why were they not as comprehensive as the emperor's blueprints in their hands? He had even listed out the training method and the detailed method of manufacturing the blueprints. However, when they looked at their blueprints, they instantly felt that they had been fooled by this kid again. Although their blueprints were different from Li Shimin's, they lacked annotations, notes on manufacturing, size, and so on. That made Yu Qigong want to bang his head against the wall. Damn it! Lao Tzu spent so much effort, and this kid only showed me this? However, he also knew how precious the blueprints were, and what Zhang Feng did. If he gave them something even better than the emperor's, wouldn't the emperor lose face? Moreover, if the blueprints were to be spread out in too much detail, it would only make the person who obtained the blueprints an even more dangerous enemy. Obviously, Zhang Feng had also thought of this. After all, in Zhang Feng's eyes, how could someone who worked for Lao Li be unscathed? What if Lao Li went to look for him? When they thought about it, they really understood. Li Shimin could not help but admire Zhang Feng. If someone else were to do this, they would not be able to do it better than Zhang Feng. What do you think? What do you think of this thing? When the three of them heard this, they hurriedly took a step back and said, "Your Majesty, this subject and the others have tried squatting at Zhang Feng's little tavern. This thing is really amazing. At the beginning, I only felt like all the energy in my body had been sucked out. I only squatted 10 times with a 100-pound sack, and I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. It was as if there was a mountain pressing down on my head. However, after returning to the palace, this old subject felt as light as a swallow. This is really strange. This old subject feels the same." "Me too." Li Shimin could not help but be surprised. With a wave of his hand, Shao Gizi hurried out. A moment later, a golden-armored Jinwu guard hurriedly appeared in the imperial study. As soon as he appeared, the imperial study was instantly filled with the unpleasant smell of sweat. Even the Jinwu guard's fists were dripping with sweat. Li Shimin asked, "You've practiced for half a day. How do you feel about this thing?" "Your Majesty, this is a divine skill from heaven. This general has practiced for half a day, but it is as tiring as if I have trained for 10 days. However, my body feels as comfortable as if it has been reborn." Chapter 662. Hearing this, Li Shimin and the other three were all shocked. Li Shimin waved his hand to dismiss the soldiers. Then he personally went to the back of the imperial study. From a secret compartment, he took out the military book that Zhang Feng gave him, and then walked out. He asked, "Did Zhang Feng give you the military book?" Hearing this, the three of them smiled bitterly. "Your Majesty, this bad guy is very bad. He didn't give us anything. Instead, he gave us a difficult question. He said that as long as we can answer it and we are not allowed to ask outsiders, he will give us everything he knows." Li Shimin was amused. This guy didn't want to give them anything. This lazy guy must know that they can't answer it with their IQ and will come to ask me. That's why he came up with this delaying tactic. Awesome. It was really ingenious. Li Shimin waved his hand and sat down opposite the three. He asked, "Tell me. I'm also very curious." Yu Qigong said, "Your Majesty, the question is like this. There are 3 armies, each with 3,000 people. These 3 armies are like the Wei, Shu, and Wu kingdoms of the 3 kingdoms period. At this time, everyone is in urgent need of food. However, there are only 5,000 dan of food. How can they divide the food equally?" Li Shimin was confused. What kind of question is this? The 3 armies added up to 9,000 people. If these 9,000 people were divided according to the 3 kingdoms, they couldn't be put together. Then it would be difficult to divide them. Li Shimin couldn't help but ask, "How did you answer?" The 3 of them gave their respective answers. Li Shimin couldn't help but laugh. This guy is really sneaky. The 3 were stunned by Li Shimin's sudden laughter and asked, "Your Majesty, you?" Li Shimin shook his head and said, "I'm telling you that this question is wrong. You've been generals all your lives. Don't you know this? You've been fooled by this guy. Tell me honestly, did you offend Fengzi? You know what this kid is capable of. Don't you know that you've been betrayed by Zhang Feng?" As he spoke, Li Shimin's expression instantly turned cold. Only then did the 3 of them break out in cold sweat. This was Zhang Feng, so it was fine. But if it was someone else like the Tubo or the Turks who were negotiating with them, what would they do? Chang Yaojin and Qin Qiong couldn't help but stare at Yu Qigong. There was even a hint of danger in their eyes. Li Shimin glanced at Yu Qigong and asked, "Minister Qin, why don't you tell us what Yu Qi has done this time?" Replying, "Your Majesty, Yu Qi." Qin Qiong hurriedly kicked Yu Qigong out of Zhang Feng's door. Then he told Li Shimin about how Zhang Feng had been lifted up. Li Shimin laughed so hard that he clutched his stomach and tears came out. Yu Qigong's originally dark face had now turned purple. Chapter 663. The 3 of them bid farewell to the emperor, then strolled around the imperial palace while heading to the Ministry of Works. There was no other way. Yu Qigong wanted to recover his losses, otherwise, he would definitely beat his wife to death when he returned this time. At this time, Yu Qigong glared at Chang Yaojin with a face full of anger. "Old Black, you're not honest. You clearly knew about this matter. Why didn't you say so earlier? You just sat there and watched Lao Tzu make a fool of himself?" Chang Yaojin heard this and spread out his hands. "You're blaming me wrongly. I already told you not to be anxious and to come to my residence first, but you didn't listen. Fengzi's matter is very special. And you also know how can this matter be said on the street? You didn't let me say it. Why are you blaming me now? Do you still want some face?" Yu Qigong heard this. He was also angry. "Can't you F***king say it directly? That's your duke's residence. Can't you F***king say it in one breath? Must you watch Lao Tzu make a fool of himself?" "Fine. I can't be bothered with you. I have to go back and study this military training manual. If you have the ability, Go find Feng Zi. Find Feng Zi and get back at him. While speaking, Chang Yaojin clasped his hands and was about to leave. At this moment, a faint voice came from behind them, causing their expressions to change drastically. What are you three brats doing here? Hearing this, the three of them hurriedly turned around, not daring to raise their heads, and hurriedly bowed. This old official greets the retired emperor. While speaking, Li Yuan, who was sitting on a sliding pole, slowly appeared in the sight of the three. Once the locusts were gone. First of all, the flowers and trees in the imperial palace seemed to have been reborn, blooming with vitality. Although it was not the beginning of autumn, all the flowers and plants had basically recovered their original lush and verdant. There was no trace of the miserable appearance during the locust plague. And a few of them looked behind Li Yuan, only to see a few disheveled women sitting in the pavilion in the middle of the lake not far away, playing poker. The three of them hurriedly lowered their heads and did not look sideways. Li Yuan waved his hand, letting the several palace maids put down their rods. Looking at the three people, he asked, I can hear your loud voices from far away, disturbing Zhen to the point that I don't even have the mood to play cards. What's wrong with you? Did the emperor reprimand you? However, I heard from your conversation that you seem to have suffered a setback. Furthermore, I vaguely heard Feng Zi's name. How could he have been bullied by that brat Zhang Feng? Hearing this, the three of them lowered their bodies even more. When Chang Yaojin heard this, he stomped hard on Qin Qiong. Qin Qiong felt the pain and said, Your Majesty, we just came back from the pub. The moment Li Yuan heard about the small tavern, his dark eyes instantly lit up. He hurriedly indicated to the three of them, Let's go. Let's go to the pavilion in the middle of the lake and chat slowly. What could the three people say? They could only follow Li Yuan to the pavilion in the middle of the lake. They saw that on the pavilion in the middle of the lake, they did not know where Li Yuan got his hands on an extremely luxurious decorated flower boat. On the boat, there were continuous sounds. With a wave of Li Yuan's hand, no matter if it was the woman in the pavilion in the middle of the lake or that flower boat, they all instantly disappeared from their sight. Even Li Yuan's palace maids who accompanied him were chased away by him. At this moment, Li Yuan asked, Tell me, what has that brat been doing recently? Some time ago, the emperor even gave him a special imperial edict. How is that Shao Mountain? How long has it been? Has he asked Zhen this time? This, Chang Yaojin and the others were dumbfounded. How the hell would they know if Zhang Feng missed you? However, it was very obvious that he was asking Chang Yaojin. Chang Yaojin honestly told Li Yuan everything that Zhang Feng had done during this period of time, including the godly Dr. Sun Simiao's visit to Shao Mountain, as well as Yu Shernan's visit to Shao Mountain. He told Li Yuan everything in detail. From time to time, Li Yuan would moan and groan like a child. This scoundrel, he took Zhen's holiday residence. Has he ever stayed there? Zhen really misses Zhen's holiday residence. When Yu Qigong heard this, he almost sprained his old waist. Mother Fastris Kerr. This brat is really audacious. He even dared to mess with retired emperor's holiday residence. However, at this moment, he did not dare to say anything. He only heard Chang Yaojin say honestly, replying retired emperor, whether the gate of the holiday residence faces east or west, this brat doesn't even know. However, Miss Jingshu often went over to arrange things. It seems like she wants to use the holiday residence as a wedding room. When Li Yuan heard this, he almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. If Zhen had held back at that time, this holiday residence would still be Zhen's. If Zhang Feng had never stayed there, then he could act shamelessly and this holiday residence would still be his. However, this Jingshu was not easy to deal with. When he thought of this, Li Yuan gnashed his teeth fiercely. This brat is really fast. This Jingshu is Zhen's. Forget it. Is that scoundrel in the tavern? Zhen has been looking for him for half a month, wanting to find him to play poker. This brat definitely knows that he is not Zhen's opponent, so he hid and even threw the holiday residence to his woman to take care of. This really infuriates old man to death. The three of them were like fools, smiling obsequiously. What did they dare to say? Although retired emperor was now somewhat muddle-headed, how could he be a muddle-headed person to be able to conquer the Tang dynasty? Chang Yaojin slapped his hand away, rolled his eyes and snorted. Lao Tzu already told you, but you didn't listen. Buzz. Yu Qigong's vision instantly turned black, and he almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. This motherfastrous cur. This joke is too big. Retired Emperor really didn't say anything wrong. If Zhang Feng wanted to kill him today, the Emperor really wouldn't give him an explanation. Thinking about that fine salt, not to mention military studies, just this fine salt beer and barbecue, no one would speak for him. Okay, Zhen won't scare you guys anymore. Tell me, why did you guys go to Fengzi? Retired Emperor, we found out that Fengzi has some military studies in his hands, so we went to ask for advice. Who would have thought that this grandson is not honest? Yu Qigong still wanted to complain, but Li Yuan rolled his eyes and automatically filtered his words. Military studies? What is this thing? Isn't it just military books and military strategies? What's so good about this thing to learn? Retired Emperor, this thing. Yu Qigong was unhappy and talked about what happened after. Anyway, he was almost damaged now, and he urgently wanted to regain a bit of confidence from Li Yuan. He suffered such a big loss, but to be able to get this thing, there was also merit. Sure enough, when Li Shimin heard this, he stretched out his hand and said, You said you made a copy? Yu Qigong nodded. Let Zhan have a look. Li Yuan couldn't help but put away his joke. Although he sat in the depths of the palace all day, he knew everything that happened outside like the back of his hand. He was still very worried about this Tubo matter, but in this case, such a thing actually came out. Obviously, this was what the Emperor got from Zhang Feng. Otherwise, this kid would definitely not be willing to say such a good thing. When Li Yuan saw this blueprint, as well as the things that were written densely with tiny words, he couldn't help but be shocked. What is the origin of this kid? If I didn't know his background, Zhen would really think that he was a god from heaven. Have you guys tested this training method? How is the effect? Replying to the Emperor, we have tried it, it's really amazing. When Li Yuan heard this, he couldn't help but be unable to sit still. Looking at the three people, he asked, Do you guys still remember the imperial edict that the Emperor bestowed to Zhang Feng last time? Tell Zhen again properly. Zhen listens, and this academy's matter. Yes. When Chang Yaojin heard this, he told Li Yuan about the academy's teaching classification, as well as what he saw and heard on Shao Mountain last time. Li Yuan couldn't help but be stunned. He stood up in surprise and asked, You said that this academy not only has military studies, but also science, psychology, and that medicine? Replying to the retired Emperor, yes. Prepare the carriage, go to the tavern. Chapter 665. Li Yuan really couldn't sit still. Along the way, he pulled Chang Yaojin to sit in the palanquin. Chang Yaojin felt like he was sitting on pins and needles, but he was still detailed and honest like a good baby. Whatever Li Yuan asked, he would answer. Just like that. The two of them sat in an ordinary palanquin, disguised as they went out of the palace, and then circled around a few times. Under the crooked tree in Tonghui Lane, Chang Yaojin was kicked down by Li Yuan, who ordered him to guard Tonghui Lane and not let even a fly in. Only then did he impatiently urge the palanquin driver to come to the tavern. At this time, at the entrance of the tavern, Zhang Feng sat cross-legged under the crooked tree, looking at the wooden door that had just been replaced, which was very different from the original color of the house. He wondered if he should replace the whole house with iron. Even that door directly changed to look like a mace. How long had it been since he knew Lao Li? The door had been broken at least 3 times. If it was kicked down, then wouldn't everyone in Chang'an City want to come and kick his door? Then what would Zhang Feng become? And just as Zhang Feng was sketching in his mind whether to replace the iron door or rebuild a reinforced concrete house, Li Yuan's excited voice sounded at the door. Boy, old man is here. This sudden voice gave Zhang Feng a big fright. But this voice, in the whole Chang'an City, only old man Li had it. It was arrogant, unruly, and unruly. Zhang Feng couldn't help but have a headache. He got up and looked at Li Yuan, who walked down the palanquin in a hurry, and said, Old man Li, what are you dressed up like? He suspected that old man Li ran out of a mental hospital. His hair was casually tied on his head, and there were even a few big red flowers on his head. The robe on his body was also askew. Li Yuan also didn't care about what Zhang Feng said. He waved his hand and pulled Zhang Feng into the tavern. He glanced at the door and said, "Brat, you should install a door." Hearing this, Zhang Feng's eyes couldn't help but light up. In an instant, countless kinds of doors as thick as city gates flashed through his mind. However, he also heard Li Yuan's teasing. After all, even if this thing was made, where would he put it? Zhang Feng invited the old man to sit down and pointed at the beer and white wine. Li Yuan chose the latter. The two of them sat down. Li Yuan did not care about his image as he drank his wine and looked at Zhang Feng, clicking his tongue non-stop. Zhang Feng felt goosebumps all over his body. "Old man, is your tongue okay?" How could Li Yuan not know that Zhang Feng was mocking him? "You brat. You've been insulting the old man since we met. Do you really think that the old man is senile?" Zhang Feng pursed his lips. Li Yuan continued, "Last time, you tricked the old man and won the old man's resort. You tell me what to do." Zhang Feng was stunned. "Do you think that the old man is really muddle-headed? Come. Let's talk about the matter of this courtyard today." Zhang Feng was dumbfounded. "Isn't it just a courtyard? Do you need to go so far?" However, Zhang Feng's eyes turned. He sighed and said, "Yeah, forget it. I thought that the old master was really loyal. So it's still like this. However, TSK, isn't it just a courtyard? In a moment, this kid will return the deed to you." When Li Yuan saw that this kid actually returned the courtyard to him, he couldn't help but become anxious. Today, he really didn't come to the courtyard. He shot a glance at Zhang Feng. How could he not know that this kid was also testing him? Li Yuan said indifferently, "That's enough. Don't think that the old man doesn't know. That courtyard, your woman has already prepared it for you. Your mouth says it's good, but what did you do behind the scenes?" If anyone dared to take out something, then he would definitely become the target of the world's literati. On the other hand, he was a viscount at this time, the Viscount of Lingshan. The bricks he was using now were not the common black bricks in the Tang dynasty, and they were not as big as the bricks in the present. His red bricks were the ones in the future. This kind of brick did not belong to the category of bricks used by the government. Therefore, Zhang Feng wasn't afraid that the government would find trouble with him. Seeing that he couldn't threaten Zhang Feng, Li Yuan had to give up. Li Yuan snorted twice and then gave up. "Boy, you have foresight. If the higher-ups investigate this thing, something will happen sooner or later." Fortunately, the old man still has some connections in the court. If you ask the old man, maybe the old man... Okay. Old man, you'd better put it away. Could it be that the person you know is more powerful than Zhongsun Wuji, the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice? Li Yuan glared. In the end, there was nothing he could do. He could only snort twice again and say, "Yeah, you boy, you don't know how to respect the old and love the young at all. I don't know how you are a teacher. How do you want to educate your students? If all the students you teach in the future are like you, how can it be? If there is no one watching over you, boy, won't you turn the sky upside down?" After Li Yuan finished speaking, he patted his forehead and said, "I remember now. That Yu Shernan was also tricked by you to go up the mountain. That godly Dr. Sun Simiao also went up the mountain. The old man also heard that Yu Shernan has already announced that he will stop writing. Moreover, he seems to be looking for Chu Suiliang and the others. This is all thanks to you, boy, right?" Zhang Feng was talked about by Li Yuan in such a way that he couldn't figure out what Li Yuan was going to do in an instant. He looked at Li Yuan suspiciously and asked, "Old man, what do you want to say?" Li Yuan didn't say anything. He only took out a brocade-covered item from his embroidered robe and patted it in his hand, saying, "The old man has a volume of Shongshu here. Boy, you should know its weight, right?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng's eyes instantly widened to the size of copper bells. Shongshu. This was one of the 5 classics of Confucianism. Back in the Western Jin dynasty, wasn't this thing lost? If this was true, then, how could it be in the old man's hands? Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel his heart heat up. With a bang, he stood up. And Li Yuan seemed to have long known the fatal attraction of this thing to scholars. Instead, he covered the bamboo slip with his embroidered robe. Looking at the slowly approaching Zhang Feng, he said, "Boy, what do you want to do? Don't come over." Zhang Feng rubbed his hands and said, "The old man is really loyal. This boy here really lacks this kind of good thing. If you are willing to part with it, we can talk about anything." The reason why he wanted to take it out today was to see if this brat knew anything about it. More importantly, he wanted to take revenge for what he had done to him. After all, after being pretentious by Zhang Feng several times, Li Yuan flew into a rage. Seeing Zhang Feng's appearance now, Li Yuan's entire body instantly felt incomparably comfortable. "Boy, you should know how precious this thing is. However, this thing can't be easily imparted to others. You should understand this principle." Moreover, when the old man obtained this thing, he almost used up more than half of his family property. Otherwise, the old man wouldn't have paid any attention to the Guanlong 8 great families. Zhang Feng was a little surprised when he heard this. At this moment, the preciousness of Shongshu was even more apparent. It was too exaggerated. Although he could hear that Li Yuan was exaggerating a little, how could he not pay any attention to the Guanlong group? "You're bragging, aren't you? They could make Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty hover between life and death. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any Li Tang. You're telling me that if you didn't buy this thing, you wouldn't pay any attention to the Guanlong group? You're bragging too much. Do you think you're the Li family of Longnan of the 5 surnames and 7 watches?" However, Zhang Feng didn't dare to say it directly. He could only lower his head and say, "Old man, you're awesome. Such a good thing, it must be the Guan Shongshu, right? Ha ha ha, at least you know what's good for you." Hearing this, Li Yuan laughed out loud and said while stroking his beard. The corners of Zhang Feng's mouth twitched as he watched Li Yuan unhurriedly untie the silk bag. In the next moment, a roll of slightly reddish-brown and slightly dark bamboo slips slowly leaked out. Although the silk threads connecting the bamboo slips had been replaced with new ones, based on the color of the bamboo slips, this thing was definitely the Guan Shongshu. This was a real treasure. If he could get it, then the reputation of White Deer College would instantly soar by a large margin. However, until now, Li Yuan still hadn't said what he wanted. Instead, he talked about how he obtained this thing with great difficulty. This let Zhang Feng know that the difficulty of obtaining this thing was undoubtedly greater. Zhang Feng couldn't help but sigh. He resisted and didn't allow himself to look at the bamboo slips that were jingling because of Li Yuan. He said, "Although I know the preciousness of this thing, there's an old saying. A gentleman doesn't take what others like. So, forget it, forget it. To be able to see it today is also a great fortune in life." Li Yuan was stunned. He looked in astonishment at Zhang Feng, who changed his face faster than flipping a book. He asked, "Kid, this is the authentic Guan Shongshu. Don't tell me you don't want it?" Chapter 668. "I want it. But you made it sound so awesome. You clearly want to use the pig slaughtering knife to kill people. Do you think Lao Tzu is a fool? Is it those sour literati who see the book as if they see the soul? What do you want? If you say it, we'll be good. Why do you have to beat around the bush? Lao Tzu doesn't care. Although this thing is good, once it exceeds Zhang Feng's tolerance, even if it's a gold mountain, Zhang Feng will turn around and leave. Want a hammer? Don't you want your life?" Li Yuan also instantly felt that he had played too much. He once again saw how difficult this kid was to deal with. However, he was not discouraged. After all, this thing had aroused this kid's interest. He was not afraid that he would not take the bait. However, his purpose was definitely not this small tavern. He sighed and said, "You've been carrying it around in the yard all day. You've become useless. I heard that your Shao Mountain is doing well now. Do you want to go with Old Man for a walk? If Old Man is happy, what's wrong with giving this thing to you?" Zhang Feng was a little suspicious. However, He finally understood the old master's intention from this sentence. Did he want to go to Shao Mountain? Fine. This is what you said. Old master, I'm very straightforward. Don't play with me. If I don't play with you, why should I play with you? Li Yuan said with a smile. Later, Li Yuan called people and basically emptied Zhang Feng's wine. He also urged Zhang Feng to get a lot of delicious food. Then the group of people set off leisurely. Along the way, Zhang Feng's group attracted a lot of attention. It was basically like moving house. They brought everything, from the small chamber pot to the big road bedboard. Zhang Feng could not help but be suspicious. Is this old master planning to settle down on Shao Mountain? Zhang Feng did not know how to ride a horse. In the end, he had no choice but to arrange a sedan chair. Only then did the group of people leave Chang'an City and leisurely head toward Shao Mountain. Along the way, Zhang Feng was thinking about the book, Shangshu, and what the old man was going to do next. However, no matter how much he thought about it, Zhang Feng still couldn't figure out what the old man was going to do. However, Zhang Feng discovered more and more that he could not see through Li Yuan. He was harder to deal with than Lao Li. At the very least, he could tell something from Li Shimon's words and deeds. However, this old man simply didn't play his cards according to common sense. This was what gave Zhang Feng a headache. In the end, Zhang Feng didn't think about it anymore. Once he went up Shao Mountain, it would be better to get rid of the old man as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would be cheated badly. Wasn't it just a villa? How much could it be worth? At most, it would be worth 1,000 taels of gold, right? But why didn't he let it go?